Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. First of all, happy Martin Luther King Day, and I hope you're surviving Blue Monday. We gotta shout at Martin Luther King. He's not just a hero for America; he's the hero America needs. He's the hero the world needs. His memory is a blessing. My name is Matthew, and I'm coming to you from Underworld North Studio in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. As always, I'm joined from across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how you doing this week? How you doing this MLK Day, Blue Monday, all that jazz? What's going on down south of the border?
I'm living in the American Golden Age, everybody. We're just
Woo!
a good time. Let the party roll.
There we
Woo!
go.
Actually, it's actually been a pretty boring day overall. Very cold
Mhm.
and windy where I am.
And by that you mean it's plus 10 Celsius. No, I'm just kidding.
62 degrees,
62,
what my
yeah,
phone says. So,
yeah. So I think when my brother was, it was down to minus 37. So down to basically where Fahrenheit and Celsius meet up.
oh dang.
Just about there. You know, that's that part of the world for you. Anyway, this week we're not talking about anything terrible. We might get into some controversial political things, you know how we do, but we're talking about accessibility. Yes, that is also can be controversial and political, but we're talking about something a bit different about accessibility. We're talking about in the Disney era of Star Wars and how it's seen an explosion of on-screen content, including a new trilogy, a whole bevy of live action shows, animated shows for a wide range of viewers. To this, a proliferation. I know I can say that word, proliferation. A whole new universe. See, I write these things and then I have to say them. A whole new universe of paper canon stories for multiple ages, culminating so far in the long-running and highly cumulative High Republic initiative. And that it's cumulative is a key point there. Now, all of these stories aim to both bring in new fans and warm the hearts of longtime lore seekers. They aim it, but that balance continues to be a notoriously difficult tightrope to walk. My description continues. Moreover, shows, books, and comics are targeted for younger audiences, and some, like the grippingly complex Andor, are clearly meant for more educated adults, and others seek to hit the bullseye of appealing to everyone. So this week we address both the empirical and the normative. How widely accessible have Star Wars stories been thus far, and how accessible should they be? It's yet another Iron Cannon deep dive. It's how we roll here, asking those kinds of deeper questions. Because we're the home for in-depth discussion on lore, etc. The whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. For slightly less in-depth discussions, because it's social media, you can follow us on Blue Sky at Iron Cannon, ironcannon.bsky.social, and at Iron Cannon Pod. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. We're still there. Why not? But mainly, I'm elevating Blue Sky. I'm putting that, sure, both for political reasons, but also simply the fact that we're both. I mean, Joel, you're definitely active on Blue Sky and not anywhere else, primarily. So, uh, just a great way if you want to get Joel's attention. Uh,
Or the
Hit him up
Discord.
there. The Discord. We'll get to the Discord. It's actually the best way. But um, the on Blue Sky, give us a follow at Iron Cannon. But yeah, I've also got the Twitter and Instagram and Threads accounts on my phone, so and access to that. So uh, those are also there as well. Iron Cannon has more tractor beam stuff, but that's a whole other conversation. Because speaking about the tractor beam, uh, Wednesdays are for comics. Comics are for Wednesdays. Despite the impending meltdown of Diamond, the Chapter 11 bankruptcy, who knows how that'll shake things up. There are still comics coming out every week. This week it's the Battle of Jakku, Last Stand number 4. That is Battle of Jakku 12 of 12. So Chris and Joel and myself will all gather all together and talk about that comic book and the whole run. Look back on the whole Battle of Jakku as a comic book run, as what it might set up for the future, what we thought about it, the 3 arcs, etc. So that is right here on Underworld, YouTube, Discord, Facebook, Iron Cannon, Discord, or not Discord, Twitch, Discord, Twitch. they're related. They're in groups. Anyway, both gaming things. Anyway, Iron Cannon, Twitch, and Underworld Twitch, and primarily primary place we like to focus on is YouTube. So here on Underworld YouTube, that's Wednesday 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So get your comics, go to the store. If the comics are in, we didn't get our review copies yet, probably because of the Martin Luther King Day. So hopefully that won't delay things too much. But you know, great person to mark and remember. But also, comics want to come out. So yeah, hopefully the embargo isn't Thursday. If it is, then probably record and then release it on Thursday. But we'll sort that out. We'll let you know. We'll be sure to let you know what the deal is with the Tractor Room Comics reviews and what we when we let you know what's going on with comics in 2025. Perennial question. So yeah, so please do check that out. Last but not least, we are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld YouTube network, or Underworld Podcast Network. Sorry, I'm Blue Monday, having a bit of trouble. Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. Here on the YouTube channel, we got memberships, we got super chats. Sorry. So if you chat us here in the comments, we'll get to the comment. We'll be happy to say hi and respond. If you super chat, we'll bump you to the top of the pile. So because we're grateful for any support you can provide to the channel and the network. And last but certainly not least, the Discord server. Down in the description below, there's a Minty Fresh link to get into the Discord server. Where we chat about Star Wars, we chat about paper canon, we chat about comics, we chat about, the shows and the movies, and there's some spoiler channels, Skeleton Crew spoiler channels. But now the show's over, fair game. But yeah, join in there, and as mentioned, tag Joel in that and ask him what his favorite action figure is. There we go. There's your homework. Nobody's taking me up on that homework. But anyway, Joel, if you want to chat a bit more about the Discord and what events are going on down there.
Yes, so we have the Star Wars Underworld Discord all ready to go for you. We have game nights, movie nights. Last night we watched, not last night, last
It was
Friday,
Friday, right?
we watched a movie, Treasure Planet. That was lots of fun.
Mhm.
I'm thinking this week we'll probably go back to the tried and true game nights, and then we'll maybe switch it up a little bit.
Nice.
So yeah, lots of new people are coming in, talk among the channels,
Mhm.
have Discords be fun, lots of good stuff going on there.
Mhm.
And yeah, interact with us. Say hi.
Yeah, that's true. I noticed there's a bunch of new people saying I've come in on Blue Sky. Like they got the link on Blue Sky. So I'm guessing through like the Underworld Blue Sky account, which is great. Great to see more people, more folks jumping into the conversation. The water's fine. The water's fine. It's fun. It's a great place to be. All right. I've spoken enough. Throw this to you, Joel. How's you have been Star Warsing this week? What do you think been thinking about this week in Star Wars?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot, and I've thought of a philosophical question, a deep philosophical question about Star Wars. Matthew,
Mhm.
what does Knights of the Old Republic have anything to do with the Skywalker saga?
Linear time.
uh Exactly.
All right.
I thought about this when we sort of have always talked about, like, Star Wars projects and their connections to the Skywalker saga.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, well, Knights of the Old Republic is like got jack to do with the Skywalker saga outside of linear time,
Mhm.
backwards. It's, but yeah, it's
Sure.
probably the most famous Star Wars video game ever. Um, there's always, and every dang year I hear a rumor of like Knights of the Old Republic series, Knights of the Old Republic series. So let's just pretend that we're
Mhm.
gonna live in a world where that actually happened. Let's just
Right.
pretend for a hot second. Let's pretend like their wish comes true.
Mhm.
Um, Something for them to complain about, monkey paw.
Mhm.
Now, if they
Yes.
do that, and it's a pretty faithful retelling of the game storyline,
Mhm.
well, then that already breaks your card. That already breaks what I think a lot of Star Wars, a certain Super Star Wars fans always think that everything has to connect back with the Skywalker saga. Because that game has nothing to do with the Skywalker saga.
Right.
And trust me, there's no retcon of like, oh, this character is Shmi's great
Mhm.
granddaddy.
Right.
There's not even the Yoda character, because there's a Yoda species character is related to Yoda. It's just a Yoda species character.
Right.
Yeah, Yaddle exists. Not all the Yoda species have to be related. If Yaddle can exist, so can older Yoda
And Grogu.
and Grogu. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess my question is, if we lived in that world where a Knights of the Old Republic series and it's an
Mhm.
adaptation of the game happens at the Disney Plus streaming service or something, I would actually think that would probably work because of the
Yeah.
linear time. Then it's linked to the Skywalker saga and kind of what I guess what you could call the core of Star Wars if we're going for the bigger definition of 1 through 9.
Mhm.
Is minimal in that it's only linear time and there are Jedi and Sith because they exist. Outside of that, there's not much. So yeah, that's kind of
Mhm.
my thought of like, well, if that happened, I'm gonna be very curious to see what I guess more all Star Wars centers in some way around the Skywalker saga people think because Knights of the Republic really doesn't, and neither do
Right.
its sequels or even its prequel, Tale of the Jedi. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's just kind of my thought of Star Wars
Interesting.
this week. I guess there's an accessibility wise. I mean,
Yeah.
there's the reason why that game is so popular. It's like it's pretty accessible. Just know a little bit about Star Wars, the movies, and here you go, Star Wars,
Mhm.
but in the past. Ooh,
Yes. It's the Old Testament as well. Um,
very Old Testament,
you know
actually.
what that makes me think though. I mean, well, first of all, I think there's more connection in that
Mm.
there's still the Force. There's still
Okay, yeah.
the Jedi as those who seek to tap into the Force as the path of wisdom, and Revan who uh departs from that path and comes back and departs and all that whole saga with him. You know, that much the themes are still there, and the Force being that world building vehicle for those themes. I mean, that's what's so brilliant about what George was doing, that it enables something like Knights of the Old Republic to be authentically Star Wars and yet have plot wise, even political scenario wise, really have nothing to do with what's happening in the Skywalker saga, especially the original trilogy because it's the Old Republic. I mean, I do think the appeal of it. Sorry, oh, long day. The appeal of it is that it is different. That it is, yeah. Well, kind of what you're getting at is you can just jump right in if you just know a bit about the world building, and that and that it explores this lore and it's satiated. And this is what legends seem to just do: is it satiated a lot of legend the folks who wanted to really fill out these pockets and corners of story. And so I mean this will get into my own week. I'll get to that in a second, but that's I think the appeal of the James Mangold film is it's not gonna have much directly to do with the Skywalker saga, but it's gonna be set even way further back from Knights of the Old Republic, right? um on the other hand, there's an interesting contrast though with say what the first major leap backwards in canon is only 200 years. And I've always thought the reason they did that was because they could say get the best of both worlds, and it worked out great. I think the High Republic
Oh yeah.
it was precisely right to do this in that you get something that is clearly written with an eye towards what sets the Jedi on this trajectory, what sets the Republic on this trajectory 200 years later, in not so perfectly defined terms, because 200 years can be a long time. And you get something like the Acolyte that picks up on that and says, okay, this is starts defining it a little more, and that's probably why we want to continue that story. But also it's and part of one of the ways it's written with an eye towards the Skywalker saga is just how different it is, right? How different the Jedi are. It's an intentional contrast. And so, I mean, I think Knights of the Old Republic. I know. I mean, uh, Tales of the Jedi.
The comic series, not the
Yeah,
book, not
the
the
comic
TV.
series. Yeah,
We
the
we
comic
always have to say
series,
that. We have to say that.
which I've only read half of, but
Ah,
the comic series. But that, I mean, the appeal of actually playing off the contrast, because that's the thing is that maybe talking about linear time, that's the thing is whenever you know the Tom Veitch and Drew Karpyshyn and them, they had to make these conscious choices to say this is what's different. They consciously had to say this is what's different. And so, I mean, even James Luceno, talking about
ooh,
is Hugo Damask and
mm,
this banker. This is, what's obviously so more intimately connected to the Skywalker saga, and especially Phantom Menace. But kind of filling out some things about the Republic politics that we hadn't gotten. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's an appeal. Maybe to put a button on what my point in response is. There's an appeal in that it's different, but consciously different than the Skywalker saga.
I mean, I think what we're talking about in a lot of ways is the difference between plot. Oop, sorry.
Yeah,
Plot connections versus just thematic
yeah, and world
connections.
building and yeah,
Right, where it's like, like you said, High Republic, we got Yoda, we got Yaddle, we got
hmm
familiar-ish, not familiar-ish enough of a
hmm
setting.
Well, we got the
Well,
temple on Coruscant.
we got the Temple on Coruscant, although I think that also exists in in the Old Republic. We just don't see it.
Mhm.
But besides the point, we got got direct character connections. We got Yoda.
Yeah,
Old Republic. It's like the only thing, like, maybe, I mean, yeah, your location, sure, there's
hmm
definitely world that still exist.
yeah,
But outside of that, like, everybody's dead. Or they're not born, not dead. Everyone's not born yet.
yeah,
So they're just this twinkle in the
hmm
galaxy's eye. So
yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good point to
hmm
be made, and we can talk about other stuff about that
Yeah, that's,
another
that's a
time.
great topic. That's a great
Yeah.
topic to get into. I think for mine, kind of similar, a little bit related, but far more microscopic and granular. So I went to go see a film. Has nothing to do with Star Wars. It's but a fellow named Robert Zimmerman, otherwise known as Bob Dylan. So I saw a complete unknown. Um, wait, yeah, just about Bob Dylan's uh, ditching the folk scene and going electric, and all the controversy and uh, kind of his character flaws that it raises. And then I get to the end credits, like, oh, James Mangold. I had no idea. Um, and and just okay. So thinking about that, one of the things the film does
Mm.
is it's very light on letting you know when something is set, like what year it is. So sometimes they say, okay, 1961, 1962, 1964, whatever. But if you see something start, like you see a relationship start, you see Bob go on a first date, and then without any kind of warning or anything, it's, oh yeah, the relationship's well developed, and it still feels, well, it's not obvious, like he doesn't come out and tell you, but it's still clear that this is a bit of a time jump, that some time has progressed for the sake of moving the story along, for the sake of it being a film. And I thought it was very effective, the way James Mangold handled these time jumps. Again, they're by about a month, whereas opposed to in a few months or whatever, maybe a year, as opposed to in his ancient Republic film, ancient Jedi film, it's going to be probably could be a couple centuries. Who knows? Could be a year. But still, I think that'll. Uh, I trust him to make those things clear, but not have to just tell us up front, because those numbers aren't going to necessarily mean much. I mean, maybe it's easier for us to know. Okay, kind of have these markers of time. Uh, with Bob Dylan's life, kind of like how I talked to you about with in Battle of Jakku with Leia and her pregnancy, right? Marker of time. So maybe that's what it is. He's able to pick something that clearly indicates a time jump, time marker uh, for us that we're able to follow. But we have to do a bit of work on it. A bit of work. I had to think, oh yeah, okay, I guess this is a few months later, and it was an interesting work. It wasn't they didn't pull me out of it. It was an interesting work. Also, James Mangold, we don't know the cast of this film necessarily, but if there's some pretty big stars, well, Timothée Chalamet is fantastic in this film. I mean, it'd be interesting if he was in this ancient
Decide
Jedi
to
film.
go from the inspiration to Star Wars, just do Star Wars.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, that's right. You did. That's right. Yeah, that'd be interesting. But to say James Mangold knows how to work with A-list stars, which may not be the easiest thing, right?
He's a pretty accomplished director.
Yeah, he is. So I'm
Not like it's
so
his
I
first
was pretty
director.
satisfied. It's making me looking forward to this film more. Just thinking about the ways that it'll things that'll translate. Obviously, there's a lot that wouldn't, but I mean, think about themes, right? In it, Bob Dylan, not a very nice fellow. He's not the hero of this story. He's kind of an anti-hero. At some points, he's almost he's like a Thanos type villain hero, if you will. Don't want to spoil too much if you want to go see it, but I'm wondering if it's an appeal. If there's going to be something, maybe
Well, he did Indiana Jones 5.
Okay, yeah.
Remember? So,
Which I have seen. Yeah. But I'm just thinking out loud. What if it's also about the origins of the Sith and about how we can kind of,
I think that's too early.
or some dark side. There's some dark side thing happening,
I could see that.
and we're led to understand the motivations of these characters, but not, understand their ends, but not approve of their means. And that's, kind of with Bob Dylan in this film. So really, really well done film. I encourage everyone to see it. And yeah, I mean, it's a true story, so it's not like I'm spoiling too much. You can go read about Bob Dylan's turn to electric guitars, but and how that kicked everyone off, and probably then ultimately earned him the place in music history that he has now. But that's a whole other discussion gonna have. But yeah, I don't know if anything I said about Mangle, the Jedi film, or even Complete Unknown or whatever, that strikes your thoughts.
No, I have I have a history with Mangold already through
Yeah.
his X-Men movies, Logan, and
So I
Indy
have seen
5.
James Mangold films. I'm just not paying attention. Is what we're saying.
And Indy
Yeah.
5. I always think
Yeah.
it's Indy 6, but no, it's Indy 5.
Mhm.
So, no, I like James Mangold quite a lot.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if I can really glean anything into,
Mhm.
a Bob Dylan film and a Star Wars movie per se.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so, yeah. All I knew was that he was doing the Bob Dylan movie, and then after
Mhm.
that, he doesn't really
Yeah.
have anything else going on. So my
Mhm.
guess is he probably, hopefully, focusing now on the Star Wars film since he's done with that.
Yeah. Let's hope.
Um, so yeah, that's all cool. But glad you got to see the new Mangled movie
Mhm.
that came out. So yeah,
Yeah. I
cool.
mean, I hope that film comes out. I mean, I think now, again, this is a broken record now. Now that Star Wars is becoming a film franchise again,
Yeah.
uh, those films have a lot more chance of coming out. So,
I will say,
mhm.
one person you should definitely keep your eye on. Who was it? He's an Andor writer. 'Cause they brought him on for this movie as well. Hang on,
Yes.
I gotta. His name is I'm gonna find it because it's gonna drive me name. James Mangold, movie writer, B something. Bio William, who is
Oh, but
apparently
Joe Williams, yeah, whatever. Joe Williams, yeah,
Bio Williams, who's
yeah,
co-writing it, who's apparently really interesting writer as
hmm
well.
yeah,
So yeah, but no, I hope so. It's
hmm
definitely something interesting. I've heard some rumblings from Schneider about
hmm
maybe when it could be filming, but
yeah,
yeah, I hope so. I love Mangold. He's one of my favorites. So yeah,
mhm.
that's all I got to say.
Yeah. I mean, well, Andor also about folks who we understand their ends, but do we question their means a little bit? There's a complexity there. So talking about basically mainly about wow, blanking, not Draven, the
Luthen?
yeah, Luthen, that guy. It's been a day. It's been a day, guys. Luthen. uh, kind of in Saw Gerrera, right? We question their means. We're supposed to question their means, which makes them interesting characters, right?
Mhm.
All right. Speaking of Star Wars on television, figured kept this thing in here just a little bit. We are going to do a full series look back in 2 weeks, just to let you all know. But thought I'd throw this out here, Joel. Any current thoughts looking back on the show? We've talked about this on talked about this on Iron Canon. I've talked about this on Tractor Beam. Um, any lingering thoughts remaining?
It's over. Aw, I'm sad.
Yeah.
No, I mean, what a finale, right?
Hmm.
What's interesting though about this show, I can
Hmm.
see this one also being a movie. Like it was 4 hours long total, and like I can
Hmm.
see like if you just edit it a certain way, I could see like how it kind of can be like a good 2 hour, 30-minute film.
Hmm.
Um, this time it didn't bother me as much as those other times.
Hmm.
Um, because yeah, this was really pretty straightforward, and I really liked the end. Really love seeing the B wings do the laser thingy.
Yeah.
That was cool. Little callback to Star Wars Rebels. Um, so that was neat. Also, we did find out Jod is not an Order 66 survivor, but his
Mhm.
master was. He's an Order 60 post Order 66
Right.
Padawan, probably, who couldn't get that far. Um, which I think is kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Uh, More like if Ezra met Kanan and then they killed Kanan, then Ezra only learned a little bit of Force.
So it's
Uh,
the Boken Jedi that
kind of,
that Balin talks about.
but
Yeah.
if uh, but if he didn't get that far and
Mhm.
didn't bother after that,
Yeah.
so there's that. Yeah, I just loved how everything came together. I'm trying to think. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I mean,
Uh,
it's still, did the episode come just under a week ago, or was it over a week ago? What
no,
is
it's
linear?
under.
What is time?
What is time?
So we
Uh,
should be doing like talking about the episode, but it's yeah. Anyway,
no,
carry on.
but yeah, I mean, no, but the episode itself was really good.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of got a
Understood.
moment, and
Hmm.
Jod's still alive. I can totally see him probably coming back.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was just a fun, cute show.
Hmm.
Unlike Acolyte, where I can feel like, oh, you wanted a season 2 and you had plans.
Yeah.
This, it's like, if it got to season 2, great.
Hmm.
If it doesn't, I feel pretty satisfied about how the story
Hmm.
goes. It's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I can say like about Atten and whatnot, but it's like, I don't know, in terms of like the story, I'm happy where it ends.
Hmm.
I kind of can put this on the shelf. I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
Maybe bring back Jod and something else, and
Hmm.
show the kids grown up now, see what's going on. But
Yeah.
outside of that, it's like I don't know. Maybe a couple years down the line, a higher public book can say, "Oh,
Yeah.
we established the Atten group, Group
Yeah.
Atten for our mint, stuff like
Or
that."
the at whatever. Oh yeah, the at admin group. Yeah.
The Ats,
Yeah. Hmm.
um,
Well, these great works. So
yeah,
even
all the
so,
great. Yeah, but outside of that, I'm pretty satisfied. This was a pretty satisfying, fun, low, kind of no
Mhm.
glow galactic stakes show, and that's that
Mhm.
right. And
Yeah.
I'm happy with it. I'm
Yeah.
happy. I feel good.
And that's what I said on Tractor Beam. It's definitely the tightest,
Oh yeah.
best well edited live action show we've gotten, which is surprising. I'm thinking about this now. I wonder if we're gonna not see it as the last of the kind of old guard of Disney Plus streaming, live action streaming for Star Wars. I wonder if we're gonna see it as kind of the first of the new one, in that this is the way forward. I'm just thinking about this now. Could be entirely wrong, but that there's going to be this bit of a hierarchy in which uh kind of like well, not kind of yeah kind of like during the sequel trilogy with Rebels, there would be there's this hierarchy where the big stories will take place on film,
Hmm.
and then the live action TV shows will be a bit smaller and less ambitious,
Hmm.
so that in case they can just have one season, that's fine. or it can feed in and can connect to the films. But that's the thing. I mean, the Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2 were kind of like that, but then season 3 got bigger. Obviously, Ahsoka is
Well, actually,
deeply
I
connected.
would counter you a little bit on Ahsoka, and I know that sounds weird to say, but when you kind
Yeah,
of look at Ahsoka and where that's going,
yeah.
I
I mean, it's
I
another galaxy.
no,
I'll give you
not
that,
even
but
that.
yeah,
I see Ahsoka as less the big event and more like what's the runway? There we go. The airplane runway
yeah.
to
I don't
Filoni's
know.
film, which is going to be the big galaxy changing confrontation with Thrawn, which is going to be a big inflection point. Because like I think again I've
Mm,
argued before. Sorry, I keep thinking my watch.
Yep.
I've argued before that Ahsoka season 1 isn't Heir of the Empire. It's the prologue to Heir of the Empire. It's not even chapter 1. Um, and the Filoni film, I feel like with the battle with Thrawn, you will
Mm,
then also see the perhaps larger implications to the galaxy. Whereas with the Ahsoka films, we're kind of just seeing it's sort of like it's the buildup,
mhm.
it's the railway, it's sort of the plane going through the tarmac before the movie is when the actual plane takes off and goes vroom. Uh,
For economic reasons, maybe, but I don't know. I think given everything they set up in the first season, with the Mortis gods, with Balin, the recasting Balin, uh, and the blue guy, right? Bringing the blue guy as probably the big bad of
mhm.
this whole era, and having him have a significant role. I don't know. I can't agree with that one. I think it is, and it's Ahsoka. She is a Skywalker. It is going to be more connected in.
See, I
Uh,
would even say Kenobi's like that too, because
yeah,
like
well, I agree.
I
Kenobi
I
is also
I don't think
part of the older ones, and I think it is a big significant moment. Right?
I would argue still that Kenobi's not as big as A New Hope. I think
Of
New
course
Hope.
not. Of course not. I just think there was an idea that I think my sense is with the Mandalorian with 2019, there was an idea that maybe put it to say this, that the gap would be closer. That would be closer in that there'd be more and bigger influence and of TV shows on screen. I do think Kenobi, I mean, shows a pivotal moment in him turning from Anakin to Luke, right, and Leia. But uh yeah, no, I do think Ahsoka might be considered kind of the last of the old guard then.
Mhm.
And then all my point to say is that Skeleton Crew, they're going to be even less ambitious, even more restrained in their this is necessary. This is going to get into our main topic a little bit. But this is necessary to connect to uh necessary to watch in order to understand what's happening. So I think in order to watch Heir to the Empire,
Mhm.
I think you're gonna have to at least know something of what happened in Ahsoka. I'm assuming it's called Heir of the Empire. You know what I mean? The
Well,
Filoni
I
film.
mean, we won't know until we actually
We
see it.
won't. It's true.
So that's what
Yeah,
crawlers for.
that's true.
Uh,
Yeah,
I mean, I got my own theories about Mandalorian right now,
yeah.
season about the movie, about how that's gonna fit and
I
not.
mean, that's a movie, right? There it is. But
And that's a movie, but I also don't
yeah,
think it's gonna be a big deal as well, weirdly
sure.
enough. Well, I mean, I don't know. We could definitely talk about this when we get to the accessibility. I'll just say
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something we definitely should kind of put a pin in and
Yeah,
see what the heck even is the next show
right.
um after Ahsoka.
Yeah.
I'm having a day myself.
If there is one, if there, I mean, that's the thing. If they are going to do more live action,
They've said they're gonna do more live action shows. I think they want to
yeah,
keep
okay,
the subscribers keep coming. It's
okay,
just what it will be. I don't know.
yeah,
That's the question. So we will see.
yeah,
We will see. But you could be right. I know some people
mm-hmm.
want that to be the direction where it's
Mm-hmm.
like you can tell the smaller stories um on Disney Plus and save the big stuff
Mm-hmm.
uh for
For the film, yeah.
the film. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I guess it kind of depends on what your definition of "quote unquote" the big stories
True.
is.
Yeah.
Because, like, I could easily have seen a world where season 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian kind of like a runway to
Yeah.
season 3 movie, where it's like that's the big take back a Mandalore movie. That's a big important event, and how I kind of
Mhm.
see right now Ahsoka kind of be like, this is the big buildup, and then the movie's going to be the climax gets thrown, and then all the implications of the
Yes.
wider galaxy are going to be felt there, and blah blah blah.
Yes.
Blah.
Here's
Or
the proof of my point.
Mhm,
Uh, if Mandalorian season 3
mhm.
was done any later, it would have been a film.
Oh, absolutely,
You know, they made
absolutely,
that a series. I've completely flipped on that. I know I used to be all different on that.
absolutely, they would.
That because it was a series, because it was another season, showed that they did want to have the bigger stories
Mhm.
on Disney Plus. But now, yeah, they're gonna have runways on Disney Plus and bigger, wider, more connected stories. I should say. I mean, that's the thing with Skeleton Crew. It was a big Star Wars story in its themes and in its characters and it's even in its world building. I mean, the whole pirate angle there, but especially its themes about the kids. Um, I'm frankly glad it wasn't a film. I think it was perfectly plotted out. It was really well paced, incredibly well paced.
Mhm.
It didn't. I keep saying this. It didn't um, compulsively just leave us hanging at the end of every episode, except for the second last one, which is the right time to do it. Like painfully leave us hanging, I should say, until the second last one, which was again the right time to do it. Um, it really, yeah, was as close to for a live action Star Wars story as close to perfect as you can get.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely. It's definitely.
just shocking for this, right?
I
Yeah.
I think it's definitely in my top 5 of my
Mhm.
favorite seasons of Star Wars TV
Yeah.
by far.
Mhm.
Somebody seems to like somebody once said this is almost like if the Endor Ewok movies were good, and I can kind of see where they're coming from because it's sort of like
Mhm.
although this had more connections with Jedi and stuff, but and the Republic showed up where, but it is definitely more of
Mhm.
that. If you watch the Ewok films, yeah, they're supposed to be set in the Star Wars galaxy, but you're like,
Yeah.
this is set in the Star Wars galaxy. Here, there's more of iconography for sure, but even
Yeah.
but in terms of like again that kind of connective tissue, I mean, sure,
Mhm.
thematically it's got the Star Wars, but it's like Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker didn't show up at the end and it's like, hey, hello, Wim.
Yes.
I am Luke. I am
Oh,
a
I'm so
astronauts,
glad that didn't happen. That
or
never.
Leia, or
Yeah.
or
They had
Hera.
X-wings. The closest thing we got were X-wings,
Yeah, pretty much. So it's like that kind of more
and
like
not this guy, just X-wing pilots.
just living in the universe without the kind of the crutch of characters. But no, I like it. I'll be curious to see
Mhm.
if that comes to pass again. I'm gonna
Mhm.
have to just see what the next show after Ahsoka
Sure.
is before I think we can properly make that
Yeah.
judgment. Because it's possible, it
Yeah.
might not be, but I don't know. We don't know. That's a what if. We
Mhm.
might see in April, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Um,
You're right.
but yeah, overall enjoyed it.
Mhm.
If it doesn't get a season 2, I won't be that bummed compared to
Mhm.
Acolyte because I was pretty
Yeah.
happy with where it ended.
Mhm.
I hope to see the characters and planets though again. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes, for
that's
sure.
that's yeah.
Yeah. Um, it was very accessible,
Oh yeah, very accessible.
despite not having so connected, or maybe because wasn't so connected. It was very accessible. So, what do you think, Joel?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Accessibility. Star Wars needs ramps. Haha.
It's well put. That was well put.
I
Yeah.
hope there are ramps in the temple
Or
and
repulsor
something like
lift things.
that. Or maybe the wheelchairs just float. Like they
Mhm.
probably have like rockets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's the future. It's the past
Mhm.
future.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk
Mhm.
about this. Accessibility in Star Wars.
Mhm.
Star Wars. There's a lot of stuff to it. Where do you start? Where do you end? Where do you go? Um
Cotton Eye Joe. Sorry.
yeah. So here we go. Let's open up with this hypothetical. Hi, I'm a new Star Wars fan. I want to get into this Star Wars. I found this cool book called Trials of the Jedi by Charles Soule. Me, a Star Wars fan. No. Yeah. Um, so with a plethora of pr-
Plethora,
proliferation
proliferation. Sorry, all
proliferation
these
of Star
words.
Wars goodies, a treasure trove of fun and enjoyment. There's a lot of Star Wars out there, and some of it builds off each other. There's a reason why Rise of Skywalker is called Episode 9.
Mhm,
Um, why there might be a 10, 11, 12, and beyond, beyond, beyond. Um,
mhm,
and it's sort of like, well, okay, you have to kind of then decide how accessible is everything.
mhm,
Can we have um shows that are built upon decades of story and an ongoing character arc? Um, and that's just from an in-universe perspective. Out of universe, of course, there's the idea of like, is Star Wars for everyone? I mean, yes,
right,
in the moral sense. But it's like Star Wars aimed at a more older audience for
mhm,
30 to 40-year-olds, and then Star Wars for younger audiences, like a Skeleton Crew, which actually was something that was brought up, by the way, in terms of Disney
mhm,
Plus, and another thing in terms of like maybe actually another counter to that is there is a thesis of older people watch Disney Plus more than younger kids because it's the parents who obviously buy the dang streaming services. So maybe there is more of an idea to aim
mhm.
something more for those older audiences and let the kids
Interesting.
stuff go more to the theaters because kids like to take their parents like taking their kids to families
Yeah,
while us grown-ups like us, we buy our Disney Plus subscriptions
yeah,
every dang year. Um so there's that as well. And I think it's something that Star Wars balances a lot over time, and I think
mhm,
kind of every individual project makes that calculation to a certain degree. So let's just start at kind of the most basic stuff, which is
mhm,
the film and TV stuff, and then we work our way.
mhm,
So one of the big reasons I think ultimately why I think to some extent the film and TV side always wants to be accessible to a certain degree because it's just expensive. So it's
yeah,
like, well, you better have more people watching it. It's like if you got 10 people watching it, it's like, what the heck are we doing?
mhm,
No one makes a Star Wars for just one person. Um, that's well, maybe George Lucas does, but even
yeah. Hey,
but
he made those movies for me.
exactly.
Yeah,
But if you want some sort of return on investment for
mhm.
sure. Uh, but Star Wars. But even within the live action sphere, we have an Ahsoka, which in some ways is built upon many years of two TV shows.
Mhm,
And I guess the Mandalorian to a degree.
yeah,
Obviously the sequel trilogies. It's called the sequels for a reason.
right,
It was seven of seven. Um,
yep.
but at the
7
same
of
time,
9. Sorry.
7 of 9. But at the same time, but then again, you got your Skeleton Crew. We just had Skeleton Crew, which is like
Mhm,
probably one of the easiest jumping on points for Star Wars I've seen in a while.
yeah,
Hey, Mandalorian season one was a great jumping on point, for people, you saw it. And
mhm,
funny enough, episode 7 again was another jumping on
yeah,
point. So it's interesting how Star Wars has balanced this out. Let's start with the movies here for a second. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of where to really start here, but
makes sense. Yeah,
I think what's fascinating about Star Wars, and let's just start with the saga, the core of Star Wars, or at
mhm,
least you know, episode 1, episode 4, episode 7. I mean, we know why episode 4 obviously has this, but 1 and 7 as well
mhm,
really do make really good jumping on points. I mean, we see it. The proof has been in the pudding. Episode 1 was for at least my generation the start of a whole new Star Wars. And I saw when episode 7 came out, a lot of people jump on the Star Wars bandwagon who didn't care at that point.
mhm,
Um, which I think is really interesting and how they managed to do it. I mean, obviously, it was episode 4. That is, the true first one in the sense that
yeah.
it came out first.
Star Wars.
Star Wars 77.
Mhm,
Episode 1 is also episode 1, but
mhm,
there was still older people who remember the original, so it's like it's it's the fourth movie that's come out chronologically, even though it's also the first.
Mm.
And then with the sequels being the seventh now, in addition to this, and a new addition to the saga, it did manage to work in with these new characters and things that people really latched onto, and a whole new generation of people who maybe only tangentially know the originals and prequels were able to enter the Star Wars fandom through.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, what do you make of that, Matthew? That
Yeah.
that all three starters of sequel, prequel, and
Mm.
original trilogy, despite what you might think,
Yeah.
are all really good starting places for people, and objectively have been starting places for people. I mean, again,
Yeah.
there's lots of evidence for
Yeah.
those that.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about episode 7, and I've talked about my issues with it,
Mhm,
not as a film, just as a viewing experience for me. It basically did some ways it did what A New Hope did. It was accessible in the way A New Hope is, in that it very quickly gets you into the world,
mhm,
gets you into the situation, doesn't overload you with details, with political details and whatnot. Um, could have had a little more of that, but makes things clear about what's going on, and gets you right in these characters that we can immediately grasp and understand. Now,
mhm,
what episode 7 did differently, of course, is um, you know the characters aren't white. Well, one of them is white, but the white woman
mhm,
and a black man, Hispanic man. So it's from a representative.
mhm,
That's another aspect of accessibility that we didn't even think too much about, but it's a very important, essential one. I think there are two, and just the way I'm thinking about this, or even the way I structured that introduction there, 45 minutes ago, there are two aspects of accessibility that I think we can talk about here. There's accessibility in the sense of jumping into the middle of a story, how much lore do you need to know?
mhm,
You jump in, like we were talking about with the live action shows and the films and whatnot
mhm,
coming out in
mhm,
this next
mhm,
phase of whatever this is. Um, but is that
mhm.
there's also accessibility in terms of how universal it is,
No, it's
like
true.
how much it taps into things that people can intuitively grasp without knowing anything. Right? In
Oh yeah,
1977, no one knew any lore at all. That didn't
there was
exist.
no lore.
There was no lore. No one knew anything even about themes or what you're sitting down for the first time. You don't know what this film is about. I
Mhm,
mean, I don't know if I guess they had newspapers doing reviews and things like that. But I mean, that's the brilliance. That's the genius of
mhm,
that first act, those first 10 minutes. I
mhm,
think in Steve Taylor in How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, he breaks down the first reel of A New Hope and how it really just quickly sets everything up. I think the Phantom Menace did maybe a better job in really getting us into everything, into where things stand and where things are at. And frankly, for folks who hadn't seen Star Wars much, especially if you were younger, you were too young to have
mhm,
seen these films, or so many kids,
mhm,
Phantom Menace was their first Star Wars,
mhm,
and you see Jar Jar on screen. He's a bumbling idiot, bumbling fool, and you love him because he's funny and he's relatable.
mhm,
And you see just the situation. Yeah, there are these droids and they're invading, and we don't necessarily think too much about uh, the taxation of outlying trade routes. But for those of us who are interested in the tax and how the taxation of outlying trade routes can
mhm,
spark a galaxy-wide conflict, war, and then which is designed to uh, engineer the rise of a totalitarian dictatorship.
mhm.
That's fascinating. I mean, that's the thing I love about this trilogy. I mean, it's scary and terrifying, and it's now the real world. But
I mean, it's always
um,
been the real world.
it's always been the real world. You're right. We're just in a more transparent iteration of it right now. Um, but yeah, I do. Yeah, it is a great point that uh, 1 and 7 they stuck to what made
Mhm,
A New Hope so so accessible and so widespread and popular.
Mhm.
It's just 7 for kind of mindlessly taking some things, plot points, just loses me in the way Phantom Menace doesn't. So
Well, I mean, I guess what you value. Do you value plot or do
yeah.
you value vibe, I guess?
Right,
You
and
know,
also the Force Awakens was not my jumping on point to Star Wars. So,
but too.
yeah,
Well,
but a lot
actually,
of
that
folks it was.
actually, well, that brings up another interesting thing about this saga is,
Mhm.
it's sort of fascinating how I don't know. You meet a lot of people, and it's like their first Star Wars was Return of the Jedi. I saw Empire Strikes Back first.
Yeah.
Um, it's sort of interesting how even the continuation of the movies, you know,
Mhm.
for the most part, I would say are accessible enough where it's like I don't know. My first Star Wars was Return of the Jedi. I started with the ending.
Yeah.
I didn't even watch A New Hope first. I went
Mhm.
backwards. Um,
Mhm.
I'm sure they're like for a lot of kids, their first Star Wars was Revenge of the Sith. Um,
Yeah.
Although the prequels are always a little bit interesting because those films are like really standalone in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Oddly,
more so than the original trilogy, yeah.
more so than the originals and the
And
sequels. I
sequels,
I
yeah,
would I would argue
a
like,
little more so. Although, I
oh
mean, Revenge of the Sith, so with war,
boy,
where did this war start? Well, just gotta watch the previous film, but
that's true. There are a few things it's like who's
yeah.
this Count Dooku guy who just
Mhm.
dies?
Yeah.
Um, he did.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's interesting, right? Like I started with Return of the Jedi and I had no problems.
Right.
Um, you know,
Mhm.
so I just think that's interesting as well. I also just think it speaks to the structure of the saga,
Mhm.
where as much as we love to say, oh, it's the Skywalker saga, it's one thing. It is this one singular entity.
Mhm.
It isn't. It isn't. If that, it
Right.
kind of isn't. 1 through 3 kind of tell their own story with their own focus and their own themes. 4 through 6 tell their own story with their own focus and their own themes and their own
Mhm.
vibe, their own tone.
Yeah.
And 7 through 9 tell again their own story with their own themes and their own vibe, their own tone.
Yeah.
The thing that connects them are characters. I mean, obviously there are universal themes across all three for
Yeah.
sure, but
Like the Force and
yeah,
the way of
the
wisdom, right?
but the
Mhm.
originals are a hero's journey,
Mhm.
typical hero's journey, good versus evil, light versus dark, some daddy issues.
Mhm.
Um, and the prequels are about a fall of the Republic and the
Mhm.
tragedy of a dude who makes a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Very different things, right? They are different things, as even though they are one thing.
Mhm.
It's even among Lucas's saga, like the sequels and the originals are different, and that's just not even to get into the fact that they were made in different times, different
Yeah.
context, all sorts of things.
Mhm.
So it is again interesting, that
Mhm.
among something that claims to be a unified thing, and you can view it as such for sure. I'm not against anybody who does. There is a reason why we say prequel fan, sequel fan,
Yeah.
original fan. There is a reason why these divides are here. Let's not pretend they don't exist, and that in some ways they aren't. In some ways, valid.
Mhm.
To give even a little validity to division for once. 'Cause they are different. They are
Not
different
division,
things.
distinction.
Distinction. That's,
Distinction.
that's a better word. I like that word
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah, these distinctions and why they are different and why the reason why people just like the prequels and the originals and sequels and like, whatever, or vice versa with the
Mhm.
sequels or the originals.
Yeah.
Um, there's a reason why people, when they watch a Star Wars show or another Star Wars movie, they say, "Oh, this has a very original trilogy vibe to it," or "This feels
Yeah.
very prequely," um, and
Right.
so on and so forth. So
Mhm.
it's funny how Star Wars again kind of makes it itself accessible for even within a 9-part series. There
Mhm.
are distinctions. There are different points. Like to go to kind of this is the only example I can think of, so I apologize. But like Harry Potter's 7
Mhm.
books,
Yeah.
I'd never tell anybody, "Oh, you can start with book 7 or book 6 or book 3."
Mhm.
Or, I wouldn't tell anybody to do that at all these days. But, back in the day, I wouldn't say that. You
Mhm.
say, you start with book 1, you read to 7. Um, with Star Wars, I feel like, I think you'd like Episode 1, or I think you should start with Episode 4,
Mhm.
or I think you'd like maybe The Last Jedi, something like that, or
Yeah.
Episode 7, even. So it's one of those interesting things where it's like a movie series. If in the context of just the saga, which is 9 parts, it's very loose compared to something as hard and as a Harry Potter back
Right.
in the day, or even the Lord of the Rings. Where it's like I
Yeah.
wouldn't say start with Return of the King. You start with Fellowship, and you
Well,
go
I
from
mean,
there.
for Tolkien, it's all one book, so
That too.
or
So
6.
that's that too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I
But,
fully go ahead.
no, I was just saying, I mean, that's why we have these discussions about viewing order,
Hmm.
right? And the discussion is for first-time viewers, right?
Hmm.
Primarily. It's what's the best jumping on point? What's the best, what gets you through the story best? That is an accessibility question, at least where we start is an accessibility question. Also, I mean, it has to do with uh twists and reveals and things like that. But um, I mean, the fact that machete order makes sense is because big reason is because New Hope is accessible. The fact that chronological makes sense is in part because Phantom Menace is accessible, right? So,
Right. No, yeah, right. I mean, I get it, right? They're both
mm,
accessible, in different ways, but they are,
mm,
A New Hope is, very simplistic, right? Best, where it's
mhm,
like you don't really get a sense of the wider galaxies. It's actually when you actually watch A New Hope, Matthew,
mm.
it's weirdly manages to be both big and small at the same time,
Sure.
right? Where it's like, you know, Battle of Yavin is obviously one of the
Mhm,
most crucial events in the Star Wars galaxy, at least of
mhm,
the Skywalker saga. It's up there for sure. Definitely in the top five.
mhm.
Um, but the movie itself, it's like you're only on Tatooine, and then the Death Star, and then Yavin.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all the galaxy you see. You don't see Coruscant. You don't see the wider galaxy. You don't. It's just these three planets.
Yeah. It
Uh,
starts simpler and then gets
right.
wider.
And then
And sorry,
funny
go ahead.
enough, with Empire, then you kind
Mhm.
of get more planets, right? You get
Yeah.
Hoth and Dagobah and
Mhm,
Bespin. Andor
mhm.
kind of goes back to being small with just Endor, unfortunately. But then,
Yeah.
with Phantom Menace, you get Naboo and Tatooine and Coruscant. And then by the time you get to Revenge
Yeah.
of the Sith, it's like you got all of Order 66 and you see all these battles
Mhm.
going all at once.
True.
And so it's like,
Yeah. I mean, I think with Phantom Menace though, it's still smaller
oh, yeah.
because it's so focused on Naboo.
Oh, yeah. That's
It starts
obviously.
on Naboo and ends on Naboo.
Mhm.
Uh,
Oh, yeah. Obviously.
so that keeps it more contained because the story itself is it's the taxation of trade routes around Naboo and this blockade around Naboo. And
Hmm.
that it's from there that it grows, right? With New Hope, it's
Hmm.
it's the Death Star, and yeah, and the Death Star primarily, and we get to the Death Star earlier in the film, and then
Right.
we get back there at the end, and we got to pick up Luke beforehand, but yeah, it that's a good point in that I mean that was again George Lucas being intentional about that, of saying I'm only going to give you so much right now because you can only take in so much and I'm throwing so much at you. Uh, and same with
Some of
Phantom
it's
Menace.
also
They're only
because they didn't
throwing
have the
so much.
budget to do some of the
Well,
stuff.
that too, but I think he probably wanted to. I mean, that's the thing. We know the script originally was one film, and then he had to expand it to three, moving to the whole Kurosawa Seven Samurai had to be in the third film uh, because it was going to be the whole thing, and he had to pare it down. So
Oh, yeah.
that's another point about accessibility. Yeah, it's a good point. Is um, well, again, that's to bring it back to Skeleton Crew. That's the exact point, right? Is anyone can jump in here and not be so confused about what's happening. You know, because it is again, it's a very small focused show.
Mhm.
Even I was reading um uh the showrunners comments again, blanking on people's names tonight.
John Watts and Christopher
John
Ford?
Watts. I was reading John Watts his comments on why they don't go into Jod's backstory. They don't have a flashback.
They actually did
Uh,
film a flashback, but they cut it.
yeah, why they cut it, right? It's because this is from the perspective of the kids.
Right.
And the kids don't know what Order 66 is. The kids don't know what's happened.
Mhm.
The kids probably wouldn't understand fully what's happened, and so they do. They just don't worry about it. The only thing about Jod's backstory, and this is also what I brought up in Tractor Beam, the only thing we know about Jod's backstory is how it's different than Wim's. Right? How it's
Right.
he he didn't grow up in a cushy suburban home with, you know, credit Republic credits his lunch money, right?
I'm thinking about those moments, and my other favorite moment of like when the
Mhm.
supervisor's like, "Oh, well, the last administration of the Republic with the Jedi are all a bunch of traitors." Great moment, by the way.
Yeah,
That's I wonder. I think it's hard for us to kind of see that moment
it is. Yeah.
because I wonder if that's almost the equivalent for audiences in '77 of like, you fought in
Mhm.
the Clone Wars, like no one
Yeah.
knew what the Clone Wars were.
So
Just
which
that
which moment, the Jod with Wim on the ship, or
no,
the
the Order 66 moments
yeah.
where you get this implication of like, oh, there's been bigger stuff going on in this galaxy that we're not
Mhm.
aware of.
Yeah.
And obviously we know what it is because we're a
Mhm.
Star Wars fan. We've seen the movies.
Sure.
But you gotta wonder if like for newcomer who for some reason Star Wars skeleton crew, like they're wondering like what the heck? What's going on
Mhm.
there? Like what happened? What's that story about?
Yeah.
Where it's like audiences in '77 probably wondered what the heck are the Clone Wars? George
Yep.
himself probably didn't
Well,
even know fully what they were. Um,
it's funny, yeah, he just throws that in as
yeah,
this sort of thing that happened.
yeah,
Well, he threw it in as this point of connection. Okay, a war. Well, here's the point: is uh the accessible point there is that, oh yeah, the point is that this war was this thing that forged this bond between Obi-Wan and Anakin.
and Vader.
Well, and Vader, yeah,
Who
or Anakin
was
and
a,
Vader, or whatever, you know.
with a
Uh,
different person back then.
yeah, but well, Obi-Wan, especially Obi-Wan and Luke's father,
Right.
and sorry, and so that's immediately accessible. We know we can grasp that story, even if we haven't been to war ourselves.
Right.
We've seen other stories like that all the time,
Mhm.
including Alec Guinness, Bridge over the River Kwai, right? Um, which yeah, I don't think I haven't actually seen all of it, but you
Mhm.
know, yeah. So again, that's immediately accessible, and then I mean that's the thing. Then we see this show in 2005, 2008,
Mm.
telling the
Indeed.
story. Of course, this character has had a lot to do with that, but also that bond.
Mm.
But yeah, we see that bond forged. It fills out that backstory,
Mhm.
but um, it stays true
Mhm.
to what Ben is telling Luke in the hut.
So yeah, that's a good segue into kind of
Hmm.
non-saga stuff now.
Hmm.
Um, as Star Wars has kind of entered it, what I call the expanded universe era
Hmm.
of everything that sort of builds off the saga in some way, be it thematically or plot wise. Um, and then I always like to kind of say, and I kind of like to joke. I take my joke seriously in this case. Of Clone Wars is George Lucas's own attempt to do the expanded universe his way.
Yeah.
Um, because the way I always sort of distinguish Clone Wars and Saga is about it's Anakin focused. It's very about him.
Hmm.
Clone Wars would allowed to be focused about a bunch of stuff it's like we can do a little bit of his history and Mortis's weird forciness and banking
Yeah.
episode. That's um
To those of us who love that, we
yeah,
love it, but not always the most successful.
but that makes some Clone Wars interesting if we kind of go back all the way to season one.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in comparison to the show after that, Rebels.
Hmm.
You know, with Clone Wars,
Hmm.
the movie, which is the pilot, it's the first thing we see, so I'm going to consider that the beginning.
Yeah.
We spend good 10 minutes, maybe more, without a new character. It's you're jumping in right away to like you're the Anakin Obi-Wan. You saw him from the movie. That's why you came. Please
Yeah.
give us money for this movie that should have been just 4 episodes of a TV
Hmm.
show. 'Cause
Yeah.
I don't know what George was thinking. And
Yeah.
then 10, 15 minutes in, I don't know. I didn't count. Then we get a new character of Ahsoka. who finally comes in. So it's interesting how Clone Wars, the
Mhm.
movie pilot, doesn't even. Clone Wars is. I'm gonna stop right there. Clone Wars is a fascinating
Mhm.
introduction. I'll just say that
Yeah.
because of two reasons. One, it starts with characters you already know,
Yeah.
and it kind of weirdly assumes as well, and this is the vibe I always get. I don't know if you agree with this or not, but maybe you do. It
Mhm.
also kind of assumes you saw the 2D show. Because look how they introduced Ventress.
Right.
They
Yeah,
don't.
that's true.
They don't. It's just here's
She's
Ventress.
just there.
She's
Yeah.
there, and everyone knows who should. You should all know who she is.
Maybe, I mean, there is an interesting mystique. I do see what you're saying,
I'm not critiquing it
but
per se. I'm just kind of
yeah. No, yeah,
making
yeah.
an observation here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some people might, but mine is just
No,
more of a
I
neutral
thought it was
observation.
great, but I do get what you mean.
Right.
Um,
Right? Even General Grievous is kind of like, here's I mean, I guess you know him from the movie, but it's like, if we were, just to kind of compare Clone Wars 2008 at the second to 2D Clone Wars,
yeah.
2D Clone Wars introduces Ventress. Like we see Dooku meet her.
Mhm.
2D Clone Wars introduces Grievous. Like the Battle of Hypori, sort of Grievous's big,
Mhm.
coming out party. Who's like, hey, the Separatists, we got this new general. He's
Right.
gonna be a badass.
Mhm.
While the Clone Wars 2008 kind of assumes you know these things already
Yeah.
and really just dives you in without any context, with the exception of
Yeah.
Ahsoka. Even Ahsoka kind of doesn't really get like this is Ventress, and she's kind of like goes with it. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, refresh my memory
Right.
because I'm having a day.
Okay.
The training arena, Dooku and Palpatine
Yeah.
in the training arena.
Hmm.
Uh, and Ventress takes out all the other folks. Is that the 2D series or the 3D series?
2D series.
So that's her introduction to the 2D series. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just plopped right into the 3D series, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a really cool, because I was like, oh, that's a really cool introduction.
Mhm.
Very mysterious introduction, but still an
Mhm.
introduction.
Mhm.
That's from the 2D series, yeah.
Yeah.
And we see that duel with Anakin uh in the yeah
2D series.
in the 2D series. Yeah. Well, I definitely that I remember. But he's still he's still a Padawan,
Mhm.
Anakin, right? We see
Right.
his knighting. We see Anakin's knighting in the 2D series. We
Yeah.
get a lot. So yeah, it's true. It does assume 3D show does assume a lot of that, which is surprising for George, right? He actually was like, yeah, I'm gonna build off of this as opposed to just do my own thing, like you're saying. You want for most things, it's him wanting to do his own thing. I will say,
Mhm.
like Clone Wars, it's a mix of accessible and not. I mean, Ahsoka herself is the classic self-insert character,
Oh,
point of
absolutely.
view
Yeah.
character.
Mhm.
Setting the mold for Ezra and for
Mhm.
Omega and for a whole bunch of others.
Right.
Um, you know, but at the same time, I mean, yeah, you got like Mortis, you got the banking, these legislative Senate things going on. Now it's accessible for those weird folks like us who are really interested in that and fascinated
Mhm.
by that. But
It's
you know,
it's
so
interesting in terms of like just the first season, I think, especially in
yeah,
terms of that
you got
accessibility part.
Yoda and those clones
Yeah.
in that arc, that kind of dire situation. Yeah, that was interesting.
Oh yeah,
But he's
but
Yoda and clones. We get that. That's a bit more accessible.
yeah, it's interesting. The actual TV episode
Mhm.
is very kind of. I mean, I guess Ventress shows up and sort of like, well, who the heck is this person?
Yeah.
Um, but uh, but yeah, but
Mhm.
the pilot just kind of like. I mean, that's kind of when because that first season of Clone Wars is very
Mhm.
weirdly. I feel like it was sort of a push and pull between we want to adhere to the 2D show, but kind
Yeah.
of build off that and like almost like, and you almost kind of got the vibe early on that like,
Mhm.
oh, like the last season of the TV show is going to mix with that. And then by the time they got to season 2 or maybe season 3, it's like, oh no,
Yeah.
we're going our own timeline now. It's an unofficial reboot, even if it's not.
Mhm.
Uh, where again, like Rebels, yes, you get the iconography of the Empire,
Mhm.
but that's more universe dressing and world building. Whereas Ezra's a new character. We meet Ezra. Ezra shows us this is what life is like under a plan of the Empire. Kanan and Hera are all new. and then we
Mhm.
kind of gradually get into more familiar things, but it's always through the Ghost Crew's eyes that we see Ahsoka, Rex, Vader,
Yeah.
etc., etc., and these characters. So it's interesting how
Mhm.
Clone Wars is first season is it's weird to say not accessible, but it certainly feels like they assume a
Mhm.
lot from you,
Yeah.
the audience. Where Rebels is very you can jump in if you have like the most passing view of Star Wars. Resistance is like that too because it's outside of like Poe and Leia. It's like here's
Mhm.
Kazuda Ziono kind
Yeah.
of doing his own thing. And then Bad Batch is interesting because Bad Batch very does have that kind of spin-off vibe of like
Mhm.
you did meet these characters before, but I
Yeah.
think their context and obviously Omega
Mhm.
kind of new introduction, kind of like put them in a new setting where it's like, okay, now you can really start to follow their storyline.
Right.
So that's just in
Um,
terms of the animated stuff.
well, and the thing is that Clone Wars, remember, is an anthology series
Okay.
with definite, clear plot lines going through.
Hmm.
Uh, but there's just so many. And at one point, I made this whole web,
Hmm.
this whole net of just the different plot lines, how they converge and how they come together. I'm quite proud of that. I think I still have that somewhere. But
It'll be fun.
yeah, it's just that this arc
Hmm.
and these arcs, like there's just these 4 episode, 2, 3 episodes, and then it eventually got more consistent.
Hmm.
It was just do this kind of story and then this kind of film. These were these little films in a way.
Hmm.
And so some of them again would be more accessible, some of them wouldn't.
Hmm.
Some of them would rely, I mean, they'd all rely on things that came before in the show.
Right.
Um, you know, uh Maul coming back, relies on seeing the weirdness of that relies on, of course, Phantom Menace. But maybe the weirdness of it is that accessible, is that interesting. I mean, that's another thing about again, the thing about accessibility. There's some people find challenge to be accessible. I mean, that's kind of the point with Andor that we
Hmm.
can get to.
Oh
'Cause
yeah.
that's the other part of accessibility, right?
Hmm.
Um is it challenging in its themes, in its world building? I guess we have this. I mean, that's the thing that Andor. Maybe this is a bit of a tangent, but Andor assumes that a wider popularity, requires it to be uh, more like our real world. And the more weird and fantastical it is, the less accessible it might be, which is probably true to some extent. I will admit that.
Hmm.
Um, but I think just because it can be weird and different doesn't mean it's necessarily inaccessible, as long as you do a good job of getting people into it. And I think Ahsoka is going to get people, season 2, I think, built up. That Balin talking about this power
Hmm.
is really going to get people, like a ramp, like you're saying, a ramp. There it is, into the weirdness of these Mortis cuts.
Hmm.
Again, that's another thing. I mean, I love Mortis. It's because it's weird. It's different, you know. So, how's it going, Tyler? Welcome. So,
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. Ooh, we got a comment.
mhm,
Hey, hi Tyler. No,
yeah,
yeah. I'm trying
yeah,
to see here. I'm looking for my notes.
yeah. Well, I guess I
Re-
want to say maybe.
okay,
Sorry, I meant to
okay, go
pick up
ahead.
on at this point. Going back to the anthology point
Hmm.
is so yeah, Rebels. Then it isn't an anthology. It's
Hmm.
uh, these arcs, these storylines are spread out across the season and they kind of overlap with each other. Bad Batch, what's interesting, Bad Batch, it is a spin-off of Clone Wars. It's in the style of Clone Wars. It continues the story of Clone Wars,
Hmm.
but it's in the structure of Rebels. And so
Yeah.
that makes it maybe more accessible, more popular, uh, but also definitely relies on everything that happens. Not everything, a lot of things that happen in Clone Wars, like with Rex and with Fives uh, and whatnot. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it
Echo,
that
yeah,
Bad Batch in terms of accessibility is an interesting one because it really is building off of stuff we see in Clone Wars,
yeah,
right? With Echo, like
yeah,
he is a Clone Wars character. He had many episodes in
yeah.
Clone Wars that
Rex and
everybody's
Cody.
Rex and Cody. The Cody episode, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
and
But
this can actually tie into a point I made in the notes that I think
mm-hmm.
we can talk about is how do these things work without that sort of kind of, I guess, emotional tie to it? So, like,
Mm,
I wrote in my notes, Ahsoka episode 5, your favorite.
yeah.
How does that work? What does somebody take away from it
Hmm.
if you never seen Clone Wars,
Yeah.
or if you don't like the prequels, or if you're just it's like if you're tied to the prequels, it's like, oh yeah, those movies. Isn't that the actor who doesn't like sand? In the kind of most neutral
Yeah.
way possible,
Hmm.
right? It's like like us, it's like, oh my god, the prodigal son is returned.
Hmm.
But how does that work, or what does
I have
that
an
sort
answer
of
for that question, but I'll leave you finish.
but what is
Yeah.
that like for someone who's kind of like,
Hmm.
I don't want to say like not emotionally invested,
Yeah.
but they're not deeply emotionally invested.
Sure.
Is they haven't been along for the ride like we
They wouldn't be by the shirt at New York Comic Con the moment they saw it, right?
have. Okay, no,
Which
yeah.
I did. Was like, oh my god, about this is a great design, brilliant design of character I love.
Mhm,
So the answer though is the success of that episode, you know, isn't primarily, it's secondarily, but not primarily
mhm,
that it's uh, Ahsoka confronting, Ahsoka confronting her experience in the Clone Wars
mhm,
and her experience with Anakin and the specifics of,
mhm,
her guilt about, the guilt that she feels about contributing to Darth Vader,
mhm,
right? Confronting that. The success of that episode is a far more universal. This is the point we're getting at before, is the universal thing of confronting extremely painful moment of your past that colored that colored your perception of the present.
mhm,
And that episode succeeds primarily because it does an amazing job communicating
mhm,
that this is what's happening. And so, like, even I wasn't fully clear. Okay, which battle is this? Is this Teth? Is this Christophsis? Those aren't Christophsis.
mhm.
Is when is this? Obviously Mandalore. We see live action.
Yeah, Mandalorian.
Yeah. But and so yeah, it hits differently in that we
Mhm,
know immediately what these moments mean for this character. Although even again, I forgot that with Teth was the big failure. How she sent all these troops in, you know, uh, and Anakin let her fail to learn, and that and all that. But that's communicated so brilliantly in the episode that it and connects so directly, right?
mhm,
That's the moment you see him walking off, and it's is it Anakin? Then it's Vader. It's Anakin. Then it's Vader.
mhm,
Um, because it communicates that the experiences led her to believe that she failed and is responsible for the creation of Darth Vader, at least partly responsible, and that she's partly responsible for this terrible thing that happened, whatever that is, that it
mhm,
is terrible. And you don't have to know who Darth Vader is to know that for Ahsoka, was a terrible thing. Um, and so again, again, it's my favorite live action episode, rightly so, understandably. Uh, Primarily because it does that. It gives non people who haven't seen Clone Wars at all, gives them that emotional, and Rebels gives them that emotional hit. I mean, that's why that Rebels episode on the Lothal Temple is probably my favorite episode of Rebels.
That's the one
Right.
which one? There's a few of them in season 1 or
In
season 2.
I think season 2, just before Twilight of the
That
Apprentice.
that's when we see Yoda, right, with the live action Clone Wars flashback stuff.
I mean, talking about in Rebels.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. In
So
Rebels,
it's not
they're
live.
no, there's a moment where they show an actual clip from Attack of the Clones. Yoda's there.
In
It's like,
Rebels,
yeah, in
maybe.
Rebels.
I mean, it
Yeah,
wouldn't
there's
be
a
live action because it's animated.
no, it was in live action. Yeah, there's a little
Oh, but
moment.
they make a. Okay, I'll have to watch that again. What I mean is specifically the moment where Ahsoka confronts this vision of Anakin and Vader.
Oh, okay, so yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's the Yoda one. I'll have to send you
yeah,
that clip, Slim, because yeah, they
yeah.
actually do use a live action clip of
I don't know why I don't
Attack of the
remember that.
Clones. Not like Attack of
I
the
would have
Clones.
remembered that. But yeah,
Yeah,
I believe you.
yeah,
I believe you.
easy.
I believe you. Um,
Um,
yeah.
it's cute. Um,
But that's the thing. You have to do that work in order to actually communicate this universal thing through this story that's already had so much story written on it. And so, I mean, it has to be Dave Filoni telling that story. I mean, he doesn't have to, but that's why he's the guy to tell that story, because he's the guy who wrote that story and he gets that story.
Well, he just continued where he left off.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, right? Yeah, sorry, my cat's looking at me.
It's all good.
Yeah, it is an interesting kind of the track that Star
Mhm.
Wars takes,
Yeah.
and I think Ahsoka is unique in that it is kind of just unabashedly just puts you in the Star Wars. It has the Star Wars characters. It's like
Mhm.
there is no well, no, it's not true. Balin and Shin are original characters, but
Yeah.
it's like here's Ahsoka. You jump in there. It's
True.
like there's no Mando to guide you in this wacky galaxy or
Mhm.
bunch of kids who find Jod to guide them in this wacky galaxy of
Yeah.
pirates. Um,
There is a self-insert character. He's from Toronto.
that's
Okay.
true.
The last
Uh,
sorry, I forgot to make the last point is the ending of that episode, and is the lightness that she feels now that she's accepted. Uh, she's chosen to live. She's chosen not to uh, embrace the myth of the past, right? The
mhm.
lie of the past. So anyway, that brings it home. Anyway, sorry, wanted to get that in.
Yeah, we talked about this a little earlier, but I'd be very curious because it's something I find very interesting about the Mandoverse in general
Mhm.
is people compare it to Marvel, and we have to see when it's all finished.
Mhm.
But I actually find the Mandoverse to be very loose and and very you
Mhm.
don't really have to watch all of it. I don't feel like
Mhm.
I didn't feel like I needed to watch any of Mandalorian to watch Ahsoka.
No,
Um,
that's true.
like you don't even need to know how
Yeah.
Morgan Elsbeth got in prison. Just hey,
Mm.
here's this character. She's in prison
Yeah.
and then she escapes.
And that's kind
Um,
of a standalone episode in The Mandalorian, right?
Yeah, that's the Ahsoka episode where
Yeah.
if anything, it's that it's important. It's interesting that episode kind of in retrospect is less
Mhm.
important just for setting up Ahsoka. That's more important to just getting Din to understand Grogu,
True.
which I think probably a good thing because it's his show. Looking at you, Book of Boba. Book of Boba is the only one that sort of like flubs it because it decides to wrap up a plot point in
Yeah.
Mandalorian in that show. Um, but Skeleton Crew, I don't need to watch Mandalorian to watch Skeleton Crew. I don't even watch Ahsoka. If I
Yeah.
were watching all these Mandoverse shows in release order,
Mhm.
Skeleton Crew is an independent arc of itself. It doesn't really
True.
need to. It's like you can kind of watch it without. What does this have to do with the Mandoverse?
Do you even
Nothing.
have to watch Star Wars to watch Skeleton Crew? That's the thing. It is probably the most accessible uh Disney Plus
Probably,
show, a live action
probably
show. Yeah.
not. Um,
Yeah.
Probably not.
As in probably not, as you're agreeing with me that
No, yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm agreeing with you.
Just be yeah.
No, I
Mhm.
think you're wrong. No, I agree with you. Um, yeah, and I'll be curious to see how well the movie plus Mando and Grogu movie, although even that to some extent,
Mhm.
but the Filoni movie works
Yeah.
as well as this Avengers like thing.
Mhm.
Because I'll be honest, I know plenty of people who say
Mhm.
they barely watched any of Phase One and just watched Avengers, and they were completely fine and got it, and
Mhm.
that's how they got into Marvel.
I
Even
got
like
into Marvel through Captain America: Civil War.
or that too.
You know?
There's a couple people who did that.
Yeah.
I think I got into Marvel more through Age of Ultron, so I got into the second
Of
Avengers.
course, you got into Star Wars through Return of the Jedi.
That's true. So
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see like the level of accessibility given to these movies, which are building
Mhm.
off of other things,
Yeah.
and to see kind of how that will work because
Mhm.
we talked about this, of course,
Mhm.
but how many people are gonna bother watching the streaming shows for Mando
Mhm.
and Grogu? How many people are
Right.
gonna bother watching Ahsoka season 1 and 2 to for the Filoni film,
Mhm.
or and whatever else is kind of that film is building off of probably just Ahsoka, I guess.
Mhm.
Right? It's like you'll probably have one group, but I think they'll still have a pretty large section of like, nah, you can watch the movie.
Mhm.
Um, so that'll be curious to see as
Mhm.
well. I mean, like you don't have to watch Andor to get
Mhm.
Rogue One, right?
True.
And um
Also, that's a prequel, so.
that's true. That's true. This is coming
Mhm.
out in a more chronological sense. So there's that.
Mhm.
Um, so that'll be interesting to see. I'm really
Mhm.
curious about that,
Yeah.
which I think can lead us to paper canon
Mhm.
because we're about to have a culmination story coming this year.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you want to probably read as much High Republic as you can before you read Trials of the Jedi.
Mhm.
I'll tell you that right now. I don't trust myself reading just that. Maybe like at best you can probably just read the adult novels,
Yeah.
but you probably should read
You
all the
gotta read
adult
the
novels.
YA. The YA novels are more important. That's the thing.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I would definitely read everything as possible
Mhm.
that. Um, before that, and maybe that kind of gets into something that
Mhm.
the books and comics can get away with that movies can't. Is just kind of sound a little weird to say.
Yeah.
They don't need to be that accessible. Um,
Right.
in some ways, they can be made just for the fans because they're cheaper. They don't need to make a lot of money back.
So much cheaper. Yeah.
Oh
To
yeah,
make.
so much
Yeah.
cheaper.
Mhm.
And also it's like book and comics are already a niche audience.
Mhm.
They unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you side of that.
Yeah.
But they're like, yeah, you can't get somebody to read a 19 book new Jedi Order series.
Right.
You can't get somebody to read. How many books are we now with High Republic?
Oh
I've lost
gosh.
count. 30, 40? I've lost count.
I don't know. I'm not counting the comics, but
Not counting, like definitely
mm,
above 19 books for High Republic,
yeah.
and have it be so intertwined. Like you're gonna be so lost if you just read Trials of the Jedi.
Yeah. But
Right?
you never know. I don't know. It'd be
I
interesting to
mean,
see how he does that. How he handles
maybe.
that.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
true. I haven't seen it,
Mhm.
but High Republic is more interconnected. So this is the weird thing, and then
Mm.
I'll let you talk.
Yeah.
In a weird way, new canon books have become more accessible than I would say even Legends got to, with the
Mm.
exception of High Republic, because
Mhm.
so many new canon books are just one and dones.
Yeah.
Like all you really need to know is like your character from movie or era from movie or show,
Mhm.
and then the book will go into maybe like a niche thing that
Mhm.
movie or TV show can't get into because reasons. Um,
Mhm.
for the most part, it's like yeah, you really can't pick up any Star Wars book and kind of start from there. High
Mhm.
Republic is the exception that proves the rule, even more so than the Legends back in the day. I will even say so.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's interesting, but I've rambled, Matthew.
No, it's okay. Think about Lost Stars. When you think about that book, and I mean, they're just everything about that book. Everything comes together to make it so perfect. Um, it's the original trilogy through these younger characters who are definitely again self-insert characters who it's the Romeo and Juliet star-crossed lovers thing,
Mhm,
you know and they're seeing these events that are often familiar to a lot of people.
mhm,
So this is for established Star Wars fans, but getting into paper canon, getting into this novel,
mhm.
or maybe even not. I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Bloodline is a good starting place, if
Yeah,
I
Bloodline's
think as
great.
well.
But so I mean, Claudia Gray, she was the person in the first part of. I mean, Chuck Wendig to some extent, but really, Claudia Gray was the person in for much of that or the early Disney canon.
Mhm,
Well, yeah, again, Lost Stars. It's this point of view of these characters, and they're seeing
mhm,
if you are familiar, if you are a Star Wars fan, it's you're getting inside the head of
mhm,
just a random somebody, whoever, a younger character, younger person. People, whoever your experience with a romantic connection, whatever it is, then that might be more relatable or not. Um, the tensions of that being on opposite sides of this war,
mhm,
uh, whatnot. Also, of course, the quality of the writing. is so fantastic, and that's another aspect of accessibility is uh, just how well it's put together and how well it's made. I mean, with Skeleton Crew, so well made. Claudia Gray, her ability with prose is
Oh
just
yeah.
you get sucked in, you get drawn in, and so yeah, with that and Bloodline too, and Leia Prince of I was thinking of Leia Prince of Alderaan, right? She and she was just the master of that
Mhm.
without it being so spoon fed. These are layered stories. These are complex stories.
Well, I
With
gotta.
young adult, they're more emotionally complex than they are necessarily uh, story complex. But yeah, it definitely brought you in. I mean, we keep wanting Lost Star sequel. We haven't gotten one yet, and it was the perfect novel really to kick off Paper Canon because it really got everyone in.
Well, I got a question that
Mhm.
I think you can answer. You
Yeah.
know, let's say I am a Star Wars. I have just
Mhm.
finished the Lucas saga. 1 through 6. Maybe I
Mm.
started even doing 7 through 9.
Yeah.
I wanna pick a book. Ask you, Matthew. Hey,
Mhm.
how's this Mask of Fear book? Is this pretty good?
You
What
know
would you say
what?
that? And feel free to give non spoilers in case
I
you're
mean,
reading
I've only read about 6 chapters in it. Um,
6 chapters. Good.
I think so for someone like you or me who loves politics,
Mhm.
loves tension, is you just especially depending on if you loved Revenge of the Sith, everything that book did. Yeah, I think that could be a great standing up point. That's the interesting. That's kind of what I'm getting at before is
Mhm.
accessibility doesn't necessarily have to mean simplicity either. It can mean just. I mean, that's the thing with Andor. I think Andor is incredibly accessible to a lot of adults who want to see something like our real world, but you know,
Mhm.
with the bit of fudging with it, kind of around the edges to say, okay, but this is still in Star Wars. It's still with the
Still a
ships and
fiction. It's still
yeah, it's still fiction. That's true. I mean, I'll tell you, reading Mask of Fear
Mhm.
is stressful because it's so close to the real world now, especially today. Um, but yeah, I think it actually can. Looking like it might have a wider appeal for folks, especially for folks who've watched the films once and really loved what George was doing in the prequels, and got the intricacies and complexities of it. Yeah, I think it's gonna be great. I think you may have had to watch Rogue One also. Maybe. I mean, having seen Rogue One, given that Bale and Saw are in it, right?
That's
And
true.
also, it is gonna be a trilogy, so that might make things more difficult. I mean, that's the thing is Aftermath wasn't terribly accessible, both because it's a trilogy. Um,
Well, some people just say it wasn't well written either. So
yeah, that's what I was about to say. Wendig's style people didn't really gravitate towards. The odd thing is though, it does start small, and it starts small, and then it starts to get bigger, grows bigger. That disappointed me. I wanted it to start big. I wanted to get a big
well, I
world
mean,
review, but
look at my take on Light of the Jedi. That's the big reason I don't
yeah,
kind of like that book. I found it very confusing. It's too big and too much going on. Just made my
interesting.
brain hurt.
Even though
Like
it also starts small. Yeah, I can
I
see that. That's the thing is it's this picks up all these different things happening on different parts of the galaxy. It does. I mean, those first 8 chapters.
I like the first
I mean,
chapter.
that's the thing. Like, so they released that. They released the Great Disaster uh, on its own before for free online, right? I
Mhm.
remember actually printing it out and saying, "I'm going to read this thing on paper."
Ow.
Made a little booklet for myself. I'm going to read this thing, all 8 chapters. And then yeah, it goes into a whole bunch. Yeah, I agree. It goes into a whole bunch of other things. So that's another thing with Trials of the Jedi, right? Is and this may be a bit of a tangent. Doesn't have too much to do with accessibility, but um, yeah, uh, if he's gonna, I mean, my suspicion is it might actually start big with all these different things happening and then come in close, which actually a lot of novels do nowadays, right? There's usually something happening over here with the main characters, and then something happening over here with the villains, and then they converge. Like Tears of the Nameless is kind of like that. I will say again, speaking of Claudia Gray, the far more accessible entry point into High Republic is Into the Dark, right? Or it was Out of the
I like
Shadows.
the Vanessa book
Yeah,
myself.
yeah, the young reader one.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it Into the Dark? I should know this.
Mm,
The
oh
Dark.
shoot, I don't remember. Because I really like
Yeah.
it. Let's see, Justina Iyer. Is
Claudia
she?
Gray.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
looking for Claudia
yeah, definitely
Gray.
Into the Dark. Claudia Gray, which
Okay.
I mean mainly uh sets up the Drengir, but it sets up my guy Reith. You know,
Well,
and
since we're
it's
the Drengir, that they get more in the comics, so that just adds another question of
they
like,
do,
well,
yeah.
now I gotta go to the comics. It's like, well, I guess
So let's just say right now, High Republic is not. I mean, it's interesting. It's not very accessible, and it's interesting that they took that risk and said, "We are gonna make you guys work, make the fans work. We're gonna make you guys spend all this money and I'll take all this spend all this time, and to see on the possibility that the resistance and the effort that uh, we're asking you to put into this
Mhm.
is going to drive its popularity. And that's another weird wrinkle with accessibility is and this isn't so much accessibility in terms of well, it's a weird wrinkle. It's something that isn't as accessible can have, at least within the scale of a fandom community, can generate more buzz.
It.
And that's the fascinating thing is uh, more than any other book panel, more than any other publishing thing, the High Republic panel at Celebration always packs it out. Now, the other panels do too, but you know it the High Republic fandom. I mean, there isn't really much cosplay for other novels, but because we've taken so much time with these characters and the designs on these characters, I mean, the fact that the creatives have done so much work, uh, it's a bit counterintuitive to the conversation we're having, uh, but I mean, it's they know our mindset. They know what it means to be a fan. It means to develop fandom, and this principle, this kind of Aristotelian principle of uh, resistance makes for attraction, and because you want to actually get to the next stage, you want to overcome this, you want to move past it, push past it. Um, so you get the reward of pushing past, get the reward of finishing a High Republic novel. And it's a higher reward than finishing a standalone Star Wars novel because you've like I always get this feeling of yeah, I'm caught up on the High Republic,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And again, it's not me being a jerk or whatever. It's just it is a bit more of an exclusive club, which again, by definition, is not accessible, but that is part of the appeal.
I have another book example of accessibility
Mhm,
in terms of this really does appeal to a niche audience. And I don't know if everyone's gonna like it, even if you're a Star Wars fan who's only
mhm,
seen the movies. I would never in a million years recommend without at least having the kind of knowing this person and kind of getting them more into the weeds of things. Sorry, my
mhm,
dad's opening a box.
yeah.
Um, I would never recommend someone's first Star Wars be any of Tim Zahn's Thrawn Ascendancy novels.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
like
Oh,
it's not even
actually,
like they're bad. It's just
yeah.
they are so their own interesting thing, and unless
Mhm,
you are like really into this kind of storytelling
mhm,
or are willing or more just deeply invested more into Star Wars and kind of like if I knew you're in it for the long run, like
yeah.
you're with us, you're one of us, you've been dragged into the pits.
Yeah.
Um,
The pit.
like I'd
Yeah.
be like, okay, yeah, you've read a bunch of stuff here. Maybe try this. It's
Mhm,
different. It's like okay, like I've read a bunch of High Republic. I kind of got that vibe. I've read a
yeah.
bunch of, I've read a bunch of canon books. I'm into that vibe.
Mhm,
Then I would be like, okay, here you go. Maybe you'd like these Thrawn books. They're unique, and that's what I
mhm.
would kind of
They're
say.
unique.
If
I
if
mean, they're good. They're good stories. They're great Thalia stories. They're great Oralani stories. It's a bit of a knock. A bit of a knock. They're not Thrawn stories. Here's my incendiary take. They're not Star Wars. They're not Star Wars stories. Yeah, there's a little bit. No, even that's Thrawn alliances. Those are Star Wars stories.
The ones in the Star
Thrawn
Wars
alliances, and
galaxy
yeah,
with Star Wars characters.
Thrawn alliances and Thrawn treats, and those are Star Wars stories. Those are weaved in around Rebels.
Mhm.
The Ascendancy trilogy is not a Star Wars trilogy. It is. It's kind of like the thing I thought about Skeleton Crew at first, where this could be just in any universe. Um, Skeleton Crew did a better job of making it feel
Mhm.
more connected. These things are just, if you want to get someone into Star Wars novels, that's maybe your question. Don't give them those. They're just something else entirely.
Give them those after they're into Star Wars novels.
Yeah, or if you want to break from Star Wars, read those. I don't know. Like, I'm just thinking now. Again, I'm not saying they're bad. They're just not Star Wars novels. They're something else, and it's fine. It's interesting. I mean, the whole ascendancy structure is fascinating, but I don't know. They're almost more. They're less than.
They're sci-fi novels.
They're sci-fi novels. That's just it, right? That's just it. They're not space fantasy. Um,
It's
like
not even the
Vision.
space fantasy. It's just
Yeah,
it's sort of like it feels so. It's like
it's just so disconnected that.
even something like Mask of Fear. I don't think is like I like just for a little I read doesn't
Yeah,
come off as like a space fantasy. It's like we're not going to see Mon and Bale go to the Mystic Sis Temple and fight the Emperor with
I want
lightsabers.
to spoil something, but I won't. I'll
Well,
say this: what makes it more space opera is the enduring the ghosts of the Jedi.
okay, that's fair enough.
I will say
But
that.
yeah, I mean that's fair. I guess
Yeah.
If you want to just define Star Wars as space opera, then yeah, you don't necessarily need magic,
No.
but but kind of that bombast.
But I'll
Um,
say this, like
but come on.
Visions is more Star Wars than the Ascendancy trilogy.
Oh God, yes,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I think
Again,
that's
again, I'm not knocking those. It's just you don't they're not an introduction to Star Wars at all.
I mean, Visions. I mean, there's I didn't bring up with Screen,
Yeah.
but just for a hot second,
Yeah.
I think Visions is also very accessible. I mean, hey,
Yeah.
there's no plot line. You don't have to worry about like
Yeah.
following up a plot line.
I mean, there's no
Uh,
overarching one. Yeah.
and it's like someone who
Hmm.
if you like anime,
Yeah.
which let's maybe something I mean
Mhm.
maybe actually you don't maybe know it's like that's a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of young kids and kids my
Oh
age
my
even, but
goodness.
a lot of young kids they love anime. Anime is the cultural thing. It's in the zeitgeist.
Every
It's
major convention,
oh
like Fan Expo Canada,
yeah.
New York Comic Con, especially Fan Expo Canada, is more anime than anything else.
Oh,
Yeah.
not
So
surprised there.
yeah.
I have my weekly anime nights every night where
Nice.
we watch a new show. But
Yeah.
it's like people who like maybe don't want to get into Star Wars, but
Mhm.
love anime, love the style, know
Yeah.
the studios. They'll be like, "Hey, I'll try this Visions thing just to kind of see
Mhm.
what the Star Wars thing is about thematically through the gaze of anime,"
Mhm.
and it works.
Yep. And they're
Um,
shorter too, shorter episodes.
and they're short. Yeah.
Yeah. Disney, well, Star Wars definitely want to lay the groundwork for the presence in Japan. And there's something happened in April that is gonna be a big celebration of Star Wars inroads into Japanese culture.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Um, One of the last things I'll bring up in terms of paper canon
Mhm.
isn't even technically paper canon. It's legends and accessibility of legends
Mm.
through older Star Wars books, and I can kind of
Yeah.
like bring kind of two things into it. One, it's hard because sometimes certain legends things are hard to find,
Mhm.
especially comics. Really, especially comics. Books are
Yeah.
thankfully getting their legends essentials.
Yeah.
Thanks
Comics are in
to
digital, and
something
there's
like
the big
that's true.
collected editions.
That's true. So they thankfully we're getting those.
Mhm.
Because sometimes it's hard to find the original Dark Horse
Yeah.
covers, and if you do, like, oh
Yeah.
god, they're expensive. In terms of accessibility, I would say you it really depends on how okay you are with old things, which I guess it's like even with the original trilogy to some extent. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and
Star
that
Trek: The Original Series, or
oh yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely a good
Yeah.
example there.
Mhm.
But also some of the Star Wars older books are more quasi timeless than others, while others definitely show like, oh, you were written in
True.
the 90s, or you were written in the 70s, weren't you? And I'm not just talking about like when Luke is giving the eye to Leia, it's like, Leia,
Yeah.
just that's your sister. Do you know? I'm talking about just kind of cultural things and
Yeah.
Star Wars being experimental because no one kind of knew
Sure.
what the universe was like outside of
Things
just
didn't age well.
things didn't age well. The original trilogy, just that was all you were building off of.
That's
So
true.
it's like, why do the Jedi behave this way? Well, we don't know what the Jedi were like in the past, so
Hmm.
this is what we're going off of. We're going off of what Obi-Wan looked like and little things that were said in the OT. Um, so there's that, and then of
Hmm.
course there's also Legends kept going, and they built up each other. So that's why
Yeah.
read a lot later post Andor books. It's like, who the heck is this Jason Solo, and why is this Admiral Dalla now the chief of state, and what the
Hmm.
heck is that? Um,
Yeah.
so uh, it's definitely one of those things where it's like it's a bit harder,
Yeah.
but I think it's definitely something where it's like you probably want to start somewhere and kind of build off of it.
Sure. I remember in high school, I read Truce of Bakura. I was gonna be like, I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna read these books. So I started with Truce of Bakura, which is a natural place to start, right?
Yeah, it's definitely one
Right,
of the better
right,
places.
right after Return of the Jedi.
Hmm.
I mean, I didn't end up going much past that. I did listen to the first New Jedi Order one. Listen to the audiobook there.
Nice.
It was interesting, kind of weird. Yeah, I mean
Definitely
that's
should read.
the thing is now they're just so much. There was just so much, so convoluted. Um, it's like getting into Marvel comics. Like you want to read,
Oh
uh,
god.
like as in like Spider-Man.
Good luck.
That,
Amazing
that
Fantasy 15, no, 1960. That's where you got to start.
but that's also why they keep rebooting, right? To say just bringing new fans. Why not? Like I just read a 4-issue run of Dazzler written by guy Jason Lowe right here in Toronto.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and it's just 4 issues, and it gets you into the character is. She has this backstory from the 70s. I don't know anything about, but kind of gave us a point of
Sorry.
it. Um, that's the thing. It's okay.
Sorry. God dang it.
Yeah, bless you, Joel's dad. There you go.
Uh,
Yeah, that again, Legends. I think part of the problem is they're all series and all no, not all, but
They built off each other a little too much, maybe.
yeah, that's the thing with current canon is that there's a lot of like a lot of standalones,
Hmm.
right? If you've seen Phantom Menace, if
Hmm.
you like Phantom Menace, then the Living Force is great.
Yeah.
Just watch that, or just read that one. Uh, if or Master and Apprentice, or
Yeah.
again another Claudia Gray, brilliant, my favorite Star Wars novel of all time. Um, you know that's the thing. I think also right, it got convoluted. There's contradictions, all these different things. So if we're talking about what to pick and what to find, you're probably just better off, in part because of things that don't age well. You're probably just better off going for a canon story. But I mean, there are some greats, right?
I'll say, yeah. I'll
Or in Darth Plagueis. I mean, Darth Plagueis is effectively a canon story, right? Yeah,
I'll say this.
yeah,
This issue is more the post Endor storylines,
sure.
whereas kind of anything else is a lot more standalone or
Mhm.
self-contained enough to kind
Yeah,
of like get into it. Plagueis is a little is interesting because it's
mhm,
really effective, but also
yeah,
you do kind of it's sort of like you get a more of an emotional oof when you kind of realize it's building off of so many things. Like
yeah,
there's a lot of references in that book, but the book is so good that it's
yeah,
sort of like, yeah, you don't need the references. It's still a good book without them.
right.
So there's that.
Mhm,
And I won't say necessarily that the end post Endor structure the bad thing. There is something
mhm,
unique about the fact that in chronological order, by just happenstance,
yeah,
you get to see Jason Solo and Jaina Solo born as babies,
mhm.
and you get to see they grow up, and then Jason Solo dies, and Jaina lives on. So it's like,
Spoiler alert. Yeah,
spoiler alert, but
yeah,
it's like there are generation of fans who like feel kind of kind of cool that like, hey, we really got to follow a
Yeah.
character from birth to death. Um,
Hmm.
they weren't happy about his death, but I mean, it's still kind of interesting where it's
Yeah.
like, in chronological order, in real time.
Right.
Some of these kids might have been 10 years old when Jason Solo was born, and then they might be 20 or 30 when he died finally.
Yeah.
Which is a unique thing to experience, I will say.
It's interesting.
Um, so there's that.
Yeah. I mean, that's again the appeal, like a lot like High Republic. What I was getting at, right? Like,
Although you don't see Vanessa get born, then she dies.
no, but like seeing, what I mean is seeing like the cumulative tracking with the cumulative story like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's that. I just think, what was I getting at? Well, I'll say with Plagueis, like I didn't know any of those references. All I knew was Phantom Menace, and it was so perfect.
Well, that's
in
just the
leading
power of
story.
a good written book, I'll
That's
just
true
say.
too. That is true too. Yeah.
Um,
We've got a great comments here from Tyler. Well, daunting as a whole, and this, I think this was gonna say, uh, standalone. They were providing standalone long form storytelling. People wanted to read. Yeah, that's true. It definitely filled filled a niche, filled a desire for people to continue the story. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, another thing it did that's a lot like, especially comics, I think did this. It's a lot like canon now. Is uh, if you're curious about a time period, you can go and read the stories that were written in those time periods, right? Um, going the options. Yeah, there was so much that you could do that. If you want to read a Han Solo story, this is Han Solo trilogy, right? If you want to know what's going on with Mos Eisley Cantina or the Bounty Hunters or whatever, we have canon versions of those. The fact povs are up that way. Um, but uh, yeah, I think, well, for example, the oh my goodness, my second favorite legend story, Dark Times. If you want to hear some stories about Jedi. And those were Jedi, of course, continuing from the Republic comic, right? The main Star Wars main run that was renamed Republic. I mean, if you want to hear read stories of the Clone Wars, read Republic, and then after the Clone Wars into the Dark Times. I love it because it's a brilliant question. What do Jedi do when their order is gone? The different pathways that they choose. I jumped right into that. It was one of the first Legends things I read. I jumped right into that, and it was
mhm.
a great way, great way in. Now, of course, I definitely was deeply thinking about Star Wars and deeply thinking about what it means, what it mean for a Jedi, and the kind of real world parallels there. But yeah, it did have its own kind of accessibility that the standalone canon novels have as well.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about comics, so I guess we kind of
Mhm.
make this our last kind of final
Yeah.
point before we wrap up.
Mhm.
The Marvel comics have been kind of in this interesting place
Mhm.
where they are building off each other, and even when they reboot,
Yeah.
they're still building off each other. Like Soul's Star Wars mainline run,
Mhm.
still building off of to build off of Solo, obviously a movie. But
Mhm.
it's like Luke knows who Afra is.
Yeah.
Afra is still continuing her
Mhm.
stories line
Mhm.
into the post Empire era. Even in Battle of Jakku, like if you read, newcomer would probably have no idea that why do Luke and this lady know each other, this Afra lady know each
Mhm.
other.
Right.
Um, I kind of agree with one critique you brought up with the Jakku book is I think it does kind of assume a little too much, the aftermath
Sure.
storyline. I mean, fun behind the scenes, folks. But in
Mhm.
Tractor Beam, they wondered who's the operator. That's a new character. And then I had to text you later. It's like
Yeah.
the operator's Gallius Rex. That was in the
I
aftermath
wondered about
book.
that. I thought about that. Yeah.
So it's like I think this comic may be assumed a little too much that you might remember
Like you have to
aftermath.
just from like, so the operator, is he someone feeding the New Republic information?
Yeah, Brax is feeding the New Republic information
Okay. I completely
as
forgot that detail. Like
as
both Chris
part of
and
it.
I completely forgot that detail.
Part of
That's a
the
pretty important
whole
detail.
destroy the empire to rebuild it, a new thing.
Yeah, and we remember
Um,
that detail. But
so there's that. Um, and when the new, it's interesting. The comics are
mm,
kind of trying to balance out. Okay,
yeah,
here are jumping off points, but we're also still building continuity from the previous two runs
mhm,
of like Afra knows Luke, and Afra's now here in her journey, and it's building off each other. It's a continuation. It's not just a full on reset where even the characters kind of back to status quo. It's like Luke's been through all this stuff. Afra's been through all this stuff. Uh, you know, it'd be interesting. The Kylo Ren comic, I think, might even be a more interesting jumping off point because
mhm,
it's going to be
yeah,
now Kylo Ren he's our character through Aizen. So if he meets up with Darth Momin, you know, you
seems
know,
likely.
it's totally probably I'm putting my good money on it. Um,
Yeah,
or somebody that Vader dealt with in either Soul's run or even Pax run or Gillen's run. If Soul
mhm,
wants to see some of that stuff. Kylo Ren at least can
yeah,
be the eyes in for the audience of like, oh, this is who Vader. Oh yeah, I dealt with Vader back in the day, and he learned
yeah,
about that in exposition. Whereas like Luke Skywalker meeting Afra again, it's like, oh, Afra, it's been a
yeah.
while.
You
What are
just
you up
jumped
to?
right in. Yeah,
Just
I mean,
so.
yeah.
Okay,
So
go
good.
ahead. No,
I
okay,
was
okay.
saying, I mean, Ochi is a good bet. Ochi Bistoon. She's still kicking around.
In the
This is the
Kylo
year.
Ren comic, because
Yeah, it's the year
no, he's
before.
dead. No, he's
No, it's the year
dead.
before Rise of Skywalker. Oh no, he dies, and why did I think he was still alive? He gets killed.
He's in a flashback.
He's a flashback, Matthew.
That's
It's been
okay.
a day. It's been a day.
It's okay.
Okay, maybe. Well, maybe something about Ochi. I don't know. Something about Ochi.
I mean, that'd be fun. I
Yeah,
actually wouldn't mind seeing Ochi in the main line if we do post Endor comic because he's still
yeah.
around back
He's still
then.
there and there. Yeah, that's right.
Um,
He gets killed by the snake because he tried to find it. Anyway, yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. Because we the only Kylo Ren comic we've gotten
mhm,
is the 4-issue run by Charles Soule. Uh, and then the standalone Age of Resistance.
mhm.
I forget who wrote that one, but because I only remember Jody Houser wrote Age of Republic. Also, just side note, Age of Comics,
Oh yeah, those are
incredibly accessible.
good.
Now we're kind of talking about folks who know the films who want to get into paper canon. That's kind of what we're getting at here.
Mhm.
But even then, they're very grounded stories. They're all very intriguing stories. But like that Qui-Gon, or
Oh
Jody
yeah.
Houser. But yeah, no, I think this would be the first. I mean, this is the first ongoing with Kylo Ren in it. One of the first paper canon stories, period, that features him. He's in a little bit in the Battlefront 2 Resurrection. But yeah, if Kylo is your guy, you want to jump in, read this comic. I think it'll, and that's the thing. I think I trust Charles to
Oh yeah.
pick people up, and that's the thing about this canon continuity.
Mhm.
And even High Republic tries to do this a little bit. Is that stuff that happened in previous books? It's written as backstory in the current story, and I gather Legends did a lot of that too.
Oh yeah.
But to say there's a reference to, oh, this happened then, kind of like in Ahsoka. Great example of this is in Ahsoka with Jason Solo, and both. Hold on. Sorry. kind of very
Wrong Jason. Wrong Jason.
wrong Jason. Sorry, not wrong Jason. Jason Sandula is who I meant to say. Sorry, your microphone got a little fuzzy there.
Oh, whoopsies.
No,
My
it's good. It's good now.
bad. Okay.
Jason Sandula,
Mhm.
like just a little bit of dialogue. This again going back to the whole accessibility question, getting people caught up, right? Uh, he's sitting in the ghost with mom, and he's saying to her, "Oh yeah, it's like when the Purgle took the bad guys or whatever it was, right? Then um, Hu Yang telling Carson, who Jason is and who his father was, and get it. Those kinds of things happen in paper canon all the time.
Oh, I mean, I'll
You know,
give you a even better example.
yeah,
To go back to the beginning of the podcast, Knights of
mhm,
the Old Republic
yeah,
built on the story on sort of the end status quo of the 1990s Tales of the Jedi
mhm,
series. It didn't have to, but it's like, you know what?
yeah,
Okay, we ended the Exar Kun War.
mhm,
This game, in some ways, is the legacy of that war and the repercussions of it.
yeah,
And you don't have to read the Tales of the Jedi comic at all to understand what's going
mhm,
on in Knights of the Old Republic. That's just backstory,
yeah,
and it's very accessible. So
mhm,
yeah, that works.
mhm. I mean, even Jedi Survivor, everything with the High Republic and that,
That's true. Yeah,
just
yeah.
just mentions it, doesn't depend on it, but it mentions it, and then gets people, like, hopefully got people curious.
I
Who,
mean, acolytes
what?
like that too. I didn't
Yeah,
feel like I
sure.
need to read
So
any books.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess I'll be curious to see
mhm,
when we kind of really understand now what the next kind of wave of comics are.
yeah,
'Cause I think that Kylo Ren book is going to be quite accessible. I mean, it's like here's
mhm,
kind of one of the more iconic movie characters
yeah.
in Kylo Ren. I'm sure a lot of people want
Adam
to,
Driver. I don't know if Adam Driver is getting residuals for this, but yeah,
whereas, it's like
mhm,
if Afra hopefully comes back,
mhm.
which I'm sure she will,
She's coming back.
how accessible as a jumping off point will that be for people who've never
Mhm,
read Afra going back to Gillen's run, which is
yeah,
interesting again because Afra is a spin-off character of the Vader comic.
yeah,
Um, so there's you have to go back to Afra's run, and if you really want to know about Afra's
mhm,
origins, gotta read the Vader comic.
yeah,
And then with mainline Star Wars, what's that gonna look like? Are we building off of just more Luke, Han, and Leia
yeah,
post with all those stuff? So I'll be very curious to kind of see, like, from that
yeah.
kind of perspective, the accessibility of the next wave.
I
Is
mean,
there?
my prediction for Star Wars 2025 Battle Segura
Mhm,
is that it's going to be a good reset. That there are going to be things, references. I think, when Chelly shows up, it'll be, oh yeah, like that time we did this on that planet, whatever. I think there's even a little bit of that. I think
mhm,
uh, in Republic Under Siege, in Battle of Jakku. Um, but yeah, I think it's going to be. I mean and I think that could be really really great jumping on point,
mhm.
like the appeal of Truce of Bakura, or in a way, right? Um, that was the appeal of Battle of Jakku, is find out what these characters are up to, because in some ways, and this is maybe what we've gotten at. I've said this a lot of times, well, many times in this podcast, but having read things that have come before, it isn't necessarily important. It just hits a little different. Knowing that Lando was on trial for betraying the rebellion, to see him swoop in there in the Lady Luck, it just feels a little different that he's so much part of everything now and so influential in everything. Um, but it isn't required. You still feel him being part of things, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's getting at the whole, do you need to have read this other thing before you get into this thing, and what difference does that make? But
I mean, I think it
it's
can
a
make it
related,
different for sure.
yeah.
If
But
you're
does
in
it
the
make a decisive difference or not? And
right.
as someone who's such a fan of reading everything before, I don't think it should make a decisive difference for whether or not someone can actually get into
Mhm.
something.
Yeah,
So,
I, I agree.
but yeah,
That's kind of a good place to
yeah.
kind of end it on, honestly. Unless you have anything last minute you thought of,
No,
or
it's interesting how I'm intrigued. I'm interested in how clear this question is, because, um,
it doesn't help
like,
that we're canon junkies.
well, no, in that, uh, like, it seems like it's this vague amorphous thing,
Mhm.
but I found we were able. I don't know, maybe because we thought about this a lot, but we're able to think about this, and it's not like we're anything special. It's, we've done our work here, but uh done our time understanding and thinking about these things. But it is one of the, I think it's one of the core questions really of all franchise media, all genre fandom,
Mhm.
especially like
I think
you know,
that's expansive, right?
yeah, like this expansive genre fandom.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, the franchise media, right? Um, but also, to say, you know, making people suspend their disbelief about these space wizards and this energy field, and like the Mortis is not very accessible. Mortis is not very accessible, but maybe the idea of the Jedi were in 1977. Clearly, they were, and so
I I think a lot of it, Matthew, will be
mhm,
if we meet somebody and we kind of are tasked with curating their Star Wars
yeah,
experience, what and kind of hoping our instincts are good enough to kind of,
hmm
make sure that I don't know, there's no true correct answer. I truly believe that.
hmm
Again, I started with episode 6. But if someone wanted us to hire, we got hired, or someone just asked, or one of our friends asked us,
yeah,
"Hey, can you curate our Star Wars experience for us?" We have this sort of important task of like, okay, we can't screw this up.
yeah,
We want them to like it,
the
like, yeah,
sacred texts
the sacred text. But no, I mean,
that
it's
are
like
page shooters.
we kind of have to use our own instincts and say, like, okay,
hmm
start here,
Yeah,
and then maybe read this or watch that, and then kind of ease it in.
hmm
Don't just be like, here's episode 9, or here's Ahsoka, here's Plagueis.
yeah,
Um, I mean, maybe that could work, but you kind
yeah.
of have to we kind of have to ease it in, and I think as we talk about it, as we think about it, that prepares us one day if we ever
hmm
get that task.
Well, I mean, I kind of have like I've soccer friends, I have church friends, or whoever,
Mhm,
especially soccer friends. They've watched Game of Thrones and they've watched
mhm,
Rings of Power or whatever. Yeah, I was having a conversation. It's not that they haven't necessarily watched maybe a bit of Mandalorian, but it's like, yeah, what Breaking Bad, all those more serious, gritty shows. Yeah, watch Andor, get into it, do it. you know, so that kind of context. Yeah, I get that for sure. So fun times. Do you have any last thoughts on your end?
No, I think Star Wars is limitless, and I think it's allowed to sometimes have things that are more niche than others.
hmm
Just make it good.
Yep.
It, it's kind of all
It's
at the
just
end. That's kind of the most basic
make
thing
it
I
good.
could say. Make it
Yeah.
good.
Write
Yeah,
good stories. Yeah.
yeah. This is an amorphic question, and I think it's one
Mhm.
we'll probably come back to many times.
Yeah, that's true. Fun times. Well, on that note, it's good time to wrap things up. Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone, in the comments, and yeah, checking this out. I forgot to mention off the top, if you prefer to listen to this on audio, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to pop this up onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So please do feel free to check us out there. Search for Ion Cannon Podcast, and also Tractor Beam is on Spotify and Apple as well. But yeah, thanks for everyone for watching, for listening. Let us know what you thought of our conversation tonight. What you thought of? Have you seen A Complete Unknown? Have you seen? What do you think of Knights of the Old Republic and Skywalker's? Last thoughts on Skeleton Crew, and of course, this whole question about accessibility in Star Wars. What have you found easy to get into? What have you found challenging? Has that challenge been an appeal or a barrier? And there we go with accessibility language right there. So thanks for joining us, and please do comment below. Joel, excellent conversation as always. Thanks for leading us through it. Where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me mostly these days at JID23234 on the Blue Sky. You can also find me on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. Check out the Star Wars Underworld Discord link in the description below.
Mhm.
Join us. We would be honored if you would
There
join
you go.
us. Yeah.
Yes. You can follow me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at MNEUG1138. MNEUG1138. Still on the Musk app, the Bird app, on NEUG485. Yeah, where else am I? Yeah, that's about it. And of course, Iron Cannon Blue Sky at Iron Cannon Blue Sky and Iron Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. I'm gonna have to think about how often. I don't really use Instagram all that much, but we'll figure out. I use my personal Instagram, which is where you can find me, MNEG1138 on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. Yeah, I mentioned that already. And also, of course, Tractor Beam this coming Wednesday. Joel is joining us for talk about Battle of Jakku, Last Stand number 4. Looking back on the whole run, maybe looking ahead if they give any kind of hint.
Let
Of
me.
what's
I
next.
want to time this podcast just for a second. I'm calling it now.
Okay.
I think At the Prime will make a cameo.
In this one, yeah. I mean, we
Yes.
know he's going to be in Jedi Knights, but
Yes, I think that's the historic figure they're talking about because Ben Solo's already in comics.
there we go.
Unless
Yes.
we're reading that marketing wrong, which is always possible.
You never know. You never know. It's pretty clear, pretty literal. Anyway, please do check that out
Mhm.
right here on Star Wars Underworld YouTube and Twitch and Iron Cannon Twitch. Yes, I guess Underworld Facebook is working here. Let us know. Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Yeah, right here, wherever you, and of course on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, got to mention if you're here on YouTube, please do give this video a like and a share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. All right, next week I'm taking a yes, I'm taking a break. I got something else going on, but getting a guest on to another Legends look back. There we go. Look at Legends X-Wing comics. It's gonna be probably, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be a fun conversation. Got a great guest lined up just for that. So please do chime in right back here, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, and later on I'll remember. You have to remind me to pop it up on the audio feeds as well right after that. But until then, let's blow this thing and head home.